Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right and having a decent, at the very least, pleasant morning. My name is Jamal Thomas. I am the host. I'm glad that you are here. As I always point out, you could be anywhere. So I'm glad that you find yourself under this voice on this morning. And I know evening for some people. If you're in Australia, pretty much an evening going into the night. Either way, wherever you are, welcome to the show. The show is going to be somewhat truncated today. I have very much that I need to do. My travel plans kind of went haywire. My next appointment that I'm supposed to be going to canceled. It's exactly at the last minute, but it's an inconvenience. And so I need to get those plans arranged and nailed down. So the last guest is probably going to be at 8:30, which is going to be Esteban. It may go a bit into the 9 o'clock hour if there's something else that I need to hit. But just be prepared for this one to be a bit shorter. Still have a damn good show for you today, though. There is a lot that is taking place around the world, especially around this issue of wars. India and Pakistan have continued up the escalatory ladder. And come to find out, there's more evidence pointing to I would say a fact, I think, that Pakistan did shoot down an Indian jet. Now, what's interesting about this is this was one of the best jets that Europe had to offer, a Rafale jet, a French-made jet, and was shot down by a Chinese missile. There's footage of this as the jet is putting out flares to try to divert. Right here. It's putting out flares trying to divert the attack that's seemingly coming from the ground. Now, there was talk about a dogfight. I haven't seen reporting on that. I've seen people talk about it on Twitter. Twitter is not, a news spot for me. So if it's just on Twitter and I can't confirm it, I don't necessarily go with it. But this visual evidence, Indian jet, missile coming from the ground, got flares, divert, bam, takes it out. In fact, it looks like it hits it twice. Jet goes to the ground. This has not let up, by the way. It's not let up. India has been launching additional attacks. Pakistan is thought to have launched additional attacks. This is, I believe this is Pakistan. They're talking about missile strikes that were launched by India into Pakistan over the course of the last day or so. Okay, why can't I hear you?
High degree of alert and neutralizing them as we speak. India has undertaken yet another blatant military act of aggression against Pakistan by sending Harap drones at multiple locations. Pakistan Armed Forces, being in a high state of alert and vigilance, have so far neutralized 12 Harap drones at various locations. These locations are Lahore, Gujranwala, Chakwal, Rawalpindi, Attak, Bahawalpur, Miano, Chor, and near Karachi.
So, no, this is not de-escalating. If anything, we're going up the escalatory ladder. There's even, I guess you can call it evidence. Oh, here's a little bit more evidence. So this is the plane that was struck down. And you can see similar identification marks on it. Looks like wreckage. There's that. Pakistan, for its part, seemingly have responded. This is from DD Geopolitics, Sarah Bill's station. And of course, there's a light in the sky. That's not a UFO. That seems to be, oh, you can't see it. This. God damn it. This. Okay, let's try this a different way. Let's stop sharing. StreamYard is being a pain in my ass right now. All right, let's try this a different way. So this is an expected or suspected attack from from Pakistan onto India. Let's start this at the beginning. And of course, you can see a light in the sky as somebody is filming it from their apartment buildings. Here's another view of this. So no, this is not de-escalating. At the very least, it doesn't seem to be anytime soon. The missiles that India was using to launch into Pakistan that the general was talking about here were Israeli-made missiles. The name of them are HARP. Okay, so right here. I know there's a lot of viewing, but it's, it's visual. And these are some kind of drones launching them into Pakistan. I would say, I can kill this. Okay, I can't kill this. Let's kill the volume on it. I will say that there is a fog of war associated with this, meaning we don't exactly know the number of people killed. We don't exactly know if India was hitting quote unquote terrorists. We have no idea. And as I keep saying, my frame of reference is America. And what I mean by that is I know what we do on some level. What other countries do, I don't know. I can only assume that other countries are human beings, made up of human beings. And because they're made up of human beings, there's going to be human error. And there's going to be a fudge factor. There's going to be dishonesty in the way they talk about it. And most likely there will be civilians. So we are in a fog of war with two warring sides attacking one another. It does seem to be true that Pakistan downed some Indian airplanes, at the very least one that we can identify. Whether it was 5, I don't know, I'm doubtful. But at the very least, there was one. There were reports of a dogfight, but again, I couldn't necessarily confirm this notion of a dogfight. People were talking about it on social media, but social media is not the same thing as actual information. There's a difference in those things. This is what we have. Al Jazeera is reporting that there's been, let's say, skirmishes between the two. They're saying, or Pakistan is saying it shot down 25 drones. Who knows? Ukraine often says that it shot down 100 drones when Russia might have sent 20 or 30. Who knows? US militaries often inflate their capabilities in both the defensive and offensive sense. So again, we're still stuck at the fog of war stage. What we can say is that there's an escalation that is taking place between two nuclear powers. Pakistan is calling for blood. India is still rageful about the 25 murdered innocent tourists that were effectively killed in Pahalgam, in the Kashmir region. And so we are still watching this take place. I would imagine that if the Victory Day parade celebrations wasn't happening, that that Russia and China would most likely be very engaged in trying to bring this to a close. But after all, they're having their Victory Day celebrations. I will also tell you, I am, priest of here. Let me go to chat for a bit. It was an Indian false flag. See, I have a hard time believing that. And maybe I don't know Indian politics. It is very difficult ledge for me to go on, or hurdle for me to climb, to believe that India is going to murder 25 of its own citizens. And I'm stuck with why. I need the why. And up to this point, I've not necessarily been given a good why. India has no reason. And again, I can't say that, but I'm unaware, that's more honest, of a reason that India would have to murder 25 of its citizens to provoke a war with Pakistan. Why? Why? I don't get the why. I don't get the why. Maybe more information will come out. Fair enough. This is news that India confirms they lost 3 planes. Fair enough. That's perfectly fine. I don't know if Pakistan shot those down or whether they crashed on their own. If they crashed on their own, oh my God, what the hell is going on with India's pilots or military capabilities? But yeah, we're in the fog of war stage. We're in the fog of war stage. Pursuant to that, or also going on at the time, and I have to be honest, I am deeply jealous, deeply jealous. The Victory Day celebrations. I am greatly disheartened by Europe and even the United States on this. 80% or more of the Nazis that were shot in the face and murdered or killed were done on the Eastern Front, meaning the Soviets. The beating heart of the Soviet Union was Russia, meaning the cost that Russia bared in blood was for all of us. And the idea that that is thrown away, ignored, this sacred thing that the world effectively came together in order to beat back the Nazi goons and lunatics and just monsters. And fast forward to 60 years or so, and that is forgotten. And not just forgotten, this thing that is sacred is smeared by using Nazis in Ukraine to go after the Russians for cynical political reasons. It's disgusting. And so when I see this Victory Day parade, my thought is, God, I'm so jealous that I can't attend. We all donated a pint of blood. The Russians donated rivers of blood in order to win this test of strength. Relentlessly, he went anyway. God bless him for doing so. In this case, you have Lula. And by the way, Lula went as drones were flying in the air, threatening Moscow. And of course, you have Xi Jinping. Oh, I'm sorry. This is not Xi Jinping. I have Xi Jinping in another picture. I want to go to my guest, though, because I want to really get into this and get into what is taking place on the ground. Johnny Miller,
Jamal, how
welcome to
are
the
you?
show, my man. How you doing? You doing okay today?
Doing okay, yeah. It's a holiday today in Russia, so I've decided
is.
to stop the work for the day. And
I
take a
am very
holiday.
jealous
For this interview,
of you
course.
right now. Are you going to go to the Victory Day celebrations?
Yeah, I probably will. I mean, I've actually been the last 2 years, so it's not all that exciting for me. That sounds funny, but it goes right by my house, so
Does
I'm
it?
not doing any work. I'm not doing any work for it. Nobody's paying me to do any work for it. So, but I'll probably get bored and go along and write a piece about it anyway. So,
Yeah, I guess it's not exciting for you. It's exciting for me every year.
yeah.
My understanding of the world, the thing that got me into politics and
Have you been
history and
before?
stuff like that was the wars. It was the wars and going through one war after the next, World War II, World War One, and then some of the Napoleonic War. Like that was my context. So when I see events like this, I get excited. And for me, it is such a loss that it is not celebrated world over, considering it was the world that beat back the Nazis with the Russians or the Soviet Union, taking the brunt of that to the tune of like 80% of the Nazis that were killed on the Eastern Front. Just for the audience to know, Johnny Miller is a British journalist based in Moscow, spending much of the Ukraine war based and reporting from the Donbass region. Thank you for joining me, man. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Oh man. I want to start at something that was put out. Like I always say, social media is not news. And if I can't confirm it, I don't run with it because it's social media. People say all sorts of things. But one of the things that came out, Ukraine has been tossing a lot of drones and attacks in the air. In fact, one of the attacks that they recently put out were 500 drones or more that was swarming, not to mention HIMARS missiles. There was, I think it was another missile system, Neptune, that was effectively fired at Russia. And all of this is taking place as people are coming in. Lula, Xi Jinping, Vucic was there on that particular picture. There was, I'm going to call it a rumor, but there was talk about the Oreshnik being threatened over Kiev, effectively saying that the Ministry of Defense was looking at targets in Kiev and warned that if any attack happens on Victory Day that is aimed at the parades and the celebrations during the truce, that there will be hell to pay, and that the Oreshnik is online for potential part of that hell to be paid. Is that true? Was that something that was released out in the Russian media sphere?
I think it was, yeah. I mean, I was having coffee with a friend near Red Square yesterday, and there were loud explosions coming up from where the Kremlin was, only about a 5-minute walk away. So the whole street sort of looked up nervously, all thinking the same thing. Is this some kind of attack? But I don't know what it was. Maybe just something fell off a building, or maybe blank artillery fire for the parade. I don't know, but there's clearly a nervousness. Not a huge no. I don't know if it'll scare anybody off going. I mean, maybe some people might think, maybe I won't bring my kids or something. But so I don't think there's too much fear. And obviously, Moscow's a big city. The parade goes right around the center. But certainly there was reports of 5 drones. The mayor of Moscow said,
"Oh, come back to me."
Shot down yesterday, which is not a major event. That seems to happen. The first time the drone attacks happened in Moscow, I went to see them, and it was just a drone had flown through a window in an apartment block on the outskirts of Moscow, and all the people in the building were just annoyed that they had to evacuate to go back. So a lot of these attacks aren't really very big; they're more for show than anything else.
Yeah.
So, will something happen? I doubt that Ukraine will try to attack Red Square. I can't. I mean, when you've got the leader of China there, leader of other countries, they're way up. Is this a wise thing to do? And,
Zelensky is threatening,
which world leaders are.
Oh, I'm sorry. There was a lag.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're absolutely right. And there is a chance. I mean, the Ukrainians have done so many crazy things in this conflict that there is a chance. Will they try to attack the outskirts of Moscow? That's more of a possibility. Well, we threatened it and we did it. Or there'll be attacks somewhere else in Russia. I suspect that'll probably happen, but they happen quite regularly. So I suspect Ukraine will do something just to say, we told, we said we'd do something and we did. But attacking the actual Red Square, I'd be surprised. And as you say, Russians have warned that if there is something like that, they will take it. They will use Oreshniks in Kiev, and I can see that happening. They will do that if there is.
Oh, so that is true. That wasn't rumor.
I've seen that report as well. And if it wasn't Russian government, it would have been some Russian influential people, politicians, basically putting out that veiled threat. There's a lot of threats on both sides and a lot of tick for tack. So a few weeks ago, Ukrainians killed a Russian drone designer I think it was the east of Russia. There's many assassinations.
Right.
And so obviously drones are becoming the most important thing in this war, one of the most important thing in the designing of drones. So the Ukrainians killed a Russian drone designer in Russia. And then 2 days ago, we had the news that a Ukrainian drone designer was assassinated in Kiev. So it's tit for tat, you do this, you do that. So when I was in Donetsk, if the Russians hit an administration building in Ukraine, the next day Ukraine would hit an administration building around the corner from me in Donetsk, and the other way around. It's tit for tat, and it's that escalation as well. And that's the only reason we haven't had nuclear weapons used, because there's that fear of that escalation. And so Ukraine would be weighing up what's in it for us attacking Red Square? Okay, it's a propaganda victory somehow, if they were to do it. What's the cons? The cons are destroying our reputations with China, Brazil, all the rest of it, and massive Russian retaliation on Kiev, it looks like they've threatened. So they kind of weigh these things up. That's why it doesn't seem to be in Ukrainian interest to attack Red Square. But you never know. They've done some crazy things, and it's NATO still that's really controlling them a lot of the time, most of the time. So what will they want? But it's going to be an interesting day tomorrow. Hopefully, it doesn't pass off with too much trouble.
Yeah, I'm so jealous. I would love to see that parade. I
Have
can
you ever
imagine how it's like. I mean, I guess my thing is, it bothers me that Europe and even the U.S. doesn't acknowledge this kind of sacred sacrifice that was made by the Soviets. And I can understand why Russia would have a parade of this scale, especially now when they're trying to make this point about, look, we are pushing back against Nazism. You guys are backing banderites in Ukraine in order to come after us. Okay, well, we need to restate this message. And the parade and the celebrations on some level do that, especially the Chinese contingent, Russian contingent, all of these groups that are there. What defensive plans are they using? I saw that they were putting air defense on buildings, all throughout Moscow.
I don't know if it's all throughout Moscow. I'm going to have a walk actually to the center after this interview, so I'll see if I see anything. But there are air defense buildings on buildings, I think. Yeah. There will be. The Russians will take these threats very, very, very seriously. And of course, the Chinese president, the Brazilian president, they would have done risk assessments as well. They would have decided, okay, and talked to the. So, but there's a lot of anti-air defense. Ukraine has been striking Moscow for a long time now. You don't really hear about it or see it. I mean, when there's a drone attack in Moscow, it might make big news, but the vast majority of Moscow won't have even heard of it. So nobody's sort of scared. It feels like a peaceful city, Moscow. But there will be air defense, absolutely, and there'll certainly be a lot more preparations for this event. Absolutely.
It is wild to me, and maybe even to many Americans, that it's a drone went through a window and people were annoyed. If that was America, they would lose their minds. The notion that a foreign country is attacking us, I don't think the perspective would be, this is aggravating. Let me go get a coffee. I really don't think that's the way we would look at it, but that is the way they look at it there.
You adapt very quickly. I mean, in Donetsk, which is the front line of the war zone for 8 years, really, and particularly since 2022, and the artillery is on the edge of the city, Ukrainian artillery, and there half the city left because of the bombing. But I was there for a long time, and you'd go to, there'd be strikes in the center quite a lot. People have to get on with their days. So it was actually a journalist friend's birthday in the center of Donetsk at a kebab place, and so I walked there, about half an hour walk from my apartment. And I heard central bus station being hit by artillery. And so I thought I'd pop by there first. Because a lot of the time you go to where the strike happens and there's no dead. It's just landed in the middle of the street. There's no story. Other times you go there, there's this bus station and there's dead bodies lying on the ground, civilians, burnt out bus, horrible sight. So I did a quick news report. And then over the road, there'll still be people waiting for their bus. So there's bodies in the street from one attack. Other people are waiting for their bus because you just have to go. And, I go to the restaurant, it's 10-minute walk away from where the strike just happened. And I said to the other journalists, they asked me where I was, and I said the bus station got hit, 2-3 dead. And they just shrugged because it's not really a story. If there's a dozen dead, that's a story that will go big in the news. But 2 dead, no, it doesn't. Only that makes the telegram channels in Donetsk. That's nothing. So, my point is you get used to it.
Yeah.
So the first time that Russia was hit, Moscow was hit by drones, I said on the edge of the city, it was big international news. But as I said, like even the people with the apartment block hit because it was just a drone went through the one window. This isn't. So, but then people just get used to it. And I'd say the vast majority of Moscow have never even heard a drone hit because it's such a big city. But
That is amazing.
people adapt. Tomorrow if your city in America starts, I don't know, getting bombed or whatever, you'll be shocked to start with. But people adapt pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. And they have to go on with their day. They still need to go to work. They still need to pay for their kids, their house, the car.
Yeah.
It's like life just goes on. Wow, that is amazing. That is really amazing. And you said the parade goes by your house. And a separate question. What is your take on the way Europe is dealing with this? Like, I don't know. From my point of view, this is sacred. Just from the expensive blood, the number of countries that got together, the Soviet Union, the US, Russia, France, all of these countries kind of joined hands to push back on Nazism, China. And now Europe has taken a completely different tact on this and wouldn't allow many of the people to even go to Moscow to celebrate the parade. Give me your take on it. I mean, I know how I feel about it.
Yeah, they're acting like children. I think there's other ceremonies as well between Russian and British people, for example, who celebrate together. I'm in touch with people in America. And there'll be many people in Britain and Europe and America who have great respect for the alliance in the Second World War, particularly some military people and others. So I know there'll be a lot of people who would, like yourself, want to be here and celebrate, that alliance that defeated Nazism. But the politicians are acting like children. I just saw on X. Fico, the Slovakian president, he's in Europe because a lot of Slovakia is quite pro-Russian or sympathetic to Russia.
Right.
And to get to Russia, Slovakia is in Eastern Europe, of course. It's probably a 1.5 hour flight, maybe a 2 hour flight to Moscow, I think, maybe. To get to Russia, he couldn't fly over EU countries. They closed all he originally flew up, I think, to Northern Europe, but they closed the border there. Then he had to fly down through Turkey, all the way down across the Mediterranean. So he's going towards America, up around Britain, up around Norway, and then down into Moscow. And you just think, what are you doing? Like, you children.
Yeah.
This is a European country with a president and a lot of the population who are sympathetic to Russia because that's their, heritage. And you're making him fly all the way around. I mean, it's just pathetic, to be honest with you. And it's done to try and scare off anybody in Europe having sympathy with the Russians or Russian positions. So even celebrating defeat the end of war in Europe, they try to make that difficult because they want to close down anybody who tries to promote good relations between Europe and Russia. They try to shut down. They'll try to ruin your career. They'll threaten to kill you in some circumstances. They'll do everything to stop a friendship between Europe and Russia. And that's the thing that really, these European and British elites and politicians, they're not patriots.
No.
They are people who are serving interests, wealthy elites. They're not patriots. They're not acting in British or European interests. You're German. They're effectively deindustrializing by shutting themselves off from Russian energy. For what? It doesn't make any sense. And these people are not patriots.
When you're doing a story in Donbass, what do? You release it on your channel? Is that how that works? Or you release it in a newspaper, an article?
So when I was in Donbass, I was working for Press TV, which is still doing stories for Press TV, which is a Middle Eastern broadcaster.
Okay.
And then just publishing on X. I have a big following on X, been on Telegram.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just do a collection of news reports. And it's usually my posts on X. I write stories on X, photographs, videos, that kind of stuff. So a lot of that work went big. And yeah, now Moscow, I just, I started a new show, actually, Press TV show, but then I just Sometimes try to do some stories, but it's not easy doing stories in Russia. I have all these story ideas, but it's difficult finding funding in Russia.
Oh, I see. I see. From standpoint of these attacks that are taking place, are these attacks? I'm very curious on what the media space in Russia is like when they're seeing 500 drone strikes as foreign leaders are coming into the country. Like when Lula was coming into the country, there were drones and missiles being fired. And to go further, HIMARS can't be fired without U.S. support. So the U.S. is still supporting attacks on Russia as it claims to want peace. How does the Russian government or even the media reconcile that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, but I think the Russians are very. They just look at the strategy of this. For this, this isn't even a war for them. It's a special military operation. If it was a war, I don't think there'd be much left of Kiev.
Right.
But if you go to Kiev, you'll have to be taken around to show any damage. You won't even know there's a war on. So this is a military operation to force Ukraine into neutrality, and unfortunately, NATO is arming them, and as you say, helping them direct strikes that is killing Russian people. Absolutely. Russia has its support, though. I think they get weapons from North Korea, possibly from Iran. So they have their help as well. But I think the Russians look at it strategically, that with this new President Trump, there's a better chance for peace. Doesn't look like it's going to happen. But ultimately, they live in the world. So when this war is done, they're going to have to they will want to have good relations with Russia and Europe. There's still a lot of trading going on between Russia and Europe. Russian and US astronauts still work together. A friend was telling me, who just came over from Europe, he was staying in a hotel, and there's a bunch of NASA American scientists sitting at the table. Yeah, absolutely. Because NASA and the Russian Roscosmos, they work together. They do work together. So the war isn't stopping them working together. So it'd be amazing. That wouldn't happen in the Second World War with Germany and Britain, for example, would it? But this war, it's a proxy war. So there's still things going on. I think that there's even Russia still exports some stuff to Russia. There's still some Western companies trading in Russia. So if there's peace tomorrow, there can be good relations very quickly with any country in Russia that wants it, or any country in Europe or America who wants there to be good relations. The Russians will say, okay, done, got what we want, let's do business, let's trade. And against Russian people, there's no animosity to Westerners, really. I mean, if you're an American, if you came to Moscow tomorrow, you'd be very welcome here. People were very curious. They'd be like, wow, I'm American. Why are you here? Oh, fantastic. Oh, that's nice. You're very welcome to. I mean, some Russian soldiers might be absolutely fine, but, there's probably some more anger there.
Yeah.
Because, they may have had comrades killed, etc. And as you say, the Americans are helping them fire the rockets. The Russian people, generally, there's no animosity to people in the West, really.
I'm curious, did you have difficulty with the language when you first got there? I mean, you effectively have immigrated there at this point. Are you?
Well, I don't know. I immigrated, but...
Oh, immigrated is too strong. Okay, fair enough.
But you live there. Maybe I can go back then. But when I went, I knew no Russian, but I worked with a translator. I had a translator in Donbass
I see.
Anya, a wonderful woman. She's in peacetime. She's a translator at Donetsk University. So the first thing you do as a correspondent or a journalist somewhere who don't speak the language, I had to just ask around for any translators. Someone gave me her contact, and then we worked together very closely for a year. We're still in touch and friends.
Oh, I see. That makes sense.
So she's a very tough woman. She has a 2-year-old daughter, translator. She speaks about 5 languages, but then effectively been with me for a year on the front lines whenever, and she's much braver than me, actually. But my Russian is slowly improving. Yeah.
I want to play a clip for you, and I want to get your take on it. But I have to ask, what was it like being on the front lines? There's another gentleman, Patrick Lancaster, who's on YouTube, who is some of those videos are kind of funny when you're watching it because it's out of context. Like in context, there's an attack coming. You're running to try to get away from the attack, and you're reporting as you're running to try to get away from the attack. Out of context, you're looking at it, and it looks kind of comical as he's, dodging away, and he's clearly not in military shape, but he's doing the job, right? What is it like being on the front lines as attacks are coming in? That's astonishing to me.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's different. Different every time. I mean, on the front. So Donetsk it's a big city, and the front lines are on the edges. So you're kind of in the center of city and it's normal civilization. So
I see.
You're at a hotel and there's a waiter, and you're having breakfast and it's civilized. You go out to a base which is sort of hidden in the city somewhere.
Yeah.
And then you meet up with the soldiers, and they'll drive you out, and suddenly you get to the last checkpoint, and then all the civilian cars disappear, and it's just you and the soldiers on the road. Maybe it's in a car or a minivan, and it's just empty, just you on the road. Then you get to the front lines, the front base camp, and different things happening there. And head out on foot to front, and sometimes it's really quiet. Sometimes there's nothing happening at all, and it's just chill out, relax. And other times it's quite heavy, so a lot of gunfire and incoming artillery a lot. And especially when one side fires artillery, the other side will reply to hit that position, so you have to hit the ground a lot. Once I was interviewing a Russian soldier in the front line trenches, kind of like a dugout place above the ground, and then bullets started coming in. I mean, I was interviewing him, and it went quite viral, the piece, and he said World War III is coming. It doesn't feel like it now, but this is the start of World War III. It got a dramatic interview, and then the bullets come, and they're so close that you hear the whizzing sound. Yeah. And then our position got hit by a rocket-propelled grenade. And the soldiers look after you, though. The soldiers down, down, down. You run into a little bunker, because the soldiers, there's a duty to look after you, no matter what nationality you are. So the soldiers really look after you. But yeah, it's always different at the front line. I mean, I know people have been killed in this war. A journalist friend, Russian journalist, was killed, I don't know, about 6 months ago in Donetsk by a drone. Anything can happen at any moment. I mean, all this crazy stuff happens.
When artillery comes in, what is that like? And I'm sorry I'm asking these questions. I'm asking because I don't know. And so they may seem simple or silly because you're there and that's been in your experience. I've never experienced artillery fire. So I don't know what it's like, which is the reason why I'm asking the questions.
Artillery is awful. It's horrendous. So I'm going to give you one example. I was trying to take a Sunday off. So I went out to my favorite cafe in Donetsk. And because the center of the city gets shelled, not all the time, far from it, but often on Sundays, I figured out it was the most dangerous day, because a Russian soldier on the front told me that basically Russia would bombard 3 days, but Ukraine would bombard for 3 days, and then Sunday everyone would take the day off, both sides. And so Sunday, I kind of pieced it together. That's probably why Sunday was the most dangerous day in Donetsk, when the Ukrainians would just say screw it and just fire artillery into the center against civilians. And so I was sitting at a cafe, and no military targets anywhere near the center of Donetsk, no military targets. And sort of sitting there, and there's some, young girls at the waiters, at the coffee shops, some guys playing cards. And suddenly everything just shakes. The building shakes, the glasses smash, landed all over my computer. I was watching football, I was watching English football, trying to relax. And the windows smash in you. And everyone runs down to the basement. Everything shakes, and it's just boom, 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 boom. And I run down to the basement. Everyone's like nervous, and you can wait for it to stop. And then I have to go out to film, because it's my job, right? So, and you take a deep breath, because you go out to film and you just hope there's no dead, because it's about 6, 7, 8 missiles land all at the same time, pretty much. all around the market where I was, and you're going out to film, and that was like that for many months when I was there. So you'd hug the wall, so you knew the artillery was coming from that area, and so you'd walk on the left side of the street. So at least you'd have some protection from the building. This is when you just went to the shops. Missiles landed outside my local supermarket. 2 of my apartments were hit. Missiles landed right outside. Some days you're in your apartment, just inside the door, almost in the toilet, just to get extra protection if it hits. So artillery is the worst. I know everyone in Donetsk would leave their front doors open for the apartment building, so you could just run in.
Wait, did you say they would leave their doors open so people can run in just in case artillery was being fired?
Yeah, so a lot of high-rise apartment blocks in Donetsk, like any big cities. So all the front doors, the apartment buildings would be left open, so you could just run in. I had to do that sometimes. And it'd just be, for a few days there'd be no bombing in the center. So you kind of think, oh, that's all right. Some days I'd go down to the reservoir and listen to sport if I was trying to relax and have a drink or whatever. Some days it'd be quite relaxing, and suddenly they just happen, the bombs. And so I'd be walking along to the shop in a sort of parky area. A guy would be walking towards me, and artillery lands, probably quite far off, but it's so loud. We both hit the ground. Get up again and sort of smile to each other and walk off, or run into buildings when you hear the. So artillery is terrifying. It's artillery, the sound of it, the smashing. Anybody can be hit at any moment. It's best just to hit the ground, lie flat when it lands, because it's not the missile that kills you generally. Although a woman was decapitated near my house just while out shopping by the missile itself, but it's not the missile that kills you; it's the shrapnel. So when it hits, the shrapnel bursts out. So you're best to hit the ground and just stay on the ground rather than run, actually, most of the time. But it's living under a city under shelling. And at the front line, when you're really in it, it's hellish artillery. I hate artillery.
Wow. That is mind-blowing. And I guess you're right. People can get used to some of anything. Especially if you don't have a choice to live under it.
Yeah. Well, some people get used to it or go mad.
Or that. Wow,
yeah.
man.
But that's why I really favor the soldiers of the front line. Really tough people. To live under that, really tough people, and a lot of people, who don't want to be there, mainly Ukrainian. And you think, to die like that. So people talk about the children and the civilians all the time, but apart from the children, it's the soldiers I care for most. It's because they're tough people, and that's a lot what this parade tomorrow is about. And I think there's going to be some soldiers who are currently fighting the war there as well, and people paying respect to them. I think that's what a lot of tomorrow in Moscow will be about.
Your experiences have been amazing. And I will tell you, when I was at the radio station, I had hoped they'd send me to Donbass because I wanted to cover it up front, to see it. Meaning, and I know that's hard to explain. And I know my mom is like, oh my God, because she knows I've said this before. It's one thing to report it from a distance. It's another thing to experience it where you have a visceral understanding of what's happening in a particular area. Those are two very different things. And you've been able to see it up front. Thankfully, you have not been injured, killed, or hurt in those experiences. But man, I can't imagine what that's like. Wow.
Yeah. I try to focus on writing kind of human stories and things, because I think, that's what I enjoy doing. And, most people can analyze the politics and the situation from afar. You don't need to go anymore, but particularly telling stories from the front line, and you do find out important information as well. But it's actually the reason I haven't been back to Donbass for a year, because it's different. It's not really a story in Donetsk anymore, and also I just don't want to die towards the end of the war.
There's that too. Nobody wants to be the last man to die, right, in a losing war. I want to play this clip by J.D. Vance, and I want to get your take on it. And because there's this talk about a peace deal. And, you know, in the United States, they've been complaining, but, oh, the Russians is not accepting Donald Trump's nonsense, ludicrous peace deal. And it's almost as if they don't fully get that from the Russian point of view, A, this is existential. B, we're not doing a Minsk 3. C, we want to solve this kind of security architecture issue of Europe in totality, not this, you know, nonsense deal that Donald Trump is coming up with that he's like, oh, I may walk away, I may walk away. They don't get it. And I want to play this clip. This is J.D. Vance, who is a more competent version of Donald Trump, talking about it.
I wouldn't say that the Russians are uninterested in bringing the thing to a resolution. What I would say is right now, the Russians are asking for a certain set of requirements, a certain set of concessions in order to end the conflict. We think they're asking for too much.
Now, I think that J.D. Vance is out of his mind. It is a rational thing to say, look, we will take a ceasefire, but we don't want you putting in weapons, intelligence. We don't want them to continue to build up another military. We don't want Europe sending in weapons. We don't want Germany sending in weapons. Meaning, if you indeed are going to do a ceasefire, then it should be a ceasefire where they stop rearming. That is not asking for too much. Like, the American position in this is very weird. Give me your take on this.
Really understands the war, or the new administration doesn't. I don't think the last one did either. And they don't realize what this war is. They don't understand the Russian mentality or culture or history or why they are fighting this war. They don't. So when Vance says the Russians are asking for too much, it just shows a lack of understanding of what Russia's aims are and the situation on the ground. Mm-hmm. Essentially, Russia is asking for Ukraine not to be a threat to it in the future, not to be a threat to these new regions. That's essentially, I think, the most important point. And you have these European countries who essentially will want to do a deal, to make peace, but then to train up Ukrainian soldiers and maybe start the war again in a year's time or 5 years' time. That I think will be Russia's main fear, and they won't want that to happen. And I think the Russian military establishment will not want this to happen. They want to make sure that any peace agreement is the end of the war for our lifetimes and hopefully for forever. That is because otherwise Russia will just have to fight it at a later date. So that's essentially what Russia is asking for. And the thing is that Russia has the ability to carry on this war until they achieve those aims. They're winning the war. Russian economy is stable. They have plenty of volunteer soldiers. So ultimately, they feel they can just carry on, grind. Now Russia's relied on volunteer soldiers. People who signed up, hundreds of thousands of Russians for good pay. There is good pay. That's important, but also for duty. Even kind of all your friends are going, you'll go. So they rely on motivated volunteers, whereas Ukraine is rounding people up on the streets, and now threatening to go after teenagers. So you see where this war is going. You see where it's heading. So Russia can stay on this path. That's one of the reasons you're not seeing huge Russian advances. Russians can lose a lot of soldiers advancing. The Ukraine have got NATO behind them, a lot of mines, a lot of, so they don't want to. Russia doesn't want to waste a lot of soldiers trying to launch these major attacks. Better just to grind Ukraine down, let them go through their population, and ultimately get what they want in the long term. And that's what Russia will do. So I think the Americans just don't really understand the reality on the ground.
See, I don't know if they don't understand the reality, they don't care. And I don't even know, the American mentality in a lot of this, especially for US presidents, is they don't want to look weak. And acknowledging or accepting what is effectively a capitulation offer by the Russians, basically, you lost the war, you don't get to dictate terms, is heavy for an American president to accept. There was reporting that Donald Trump didn't just want to walk away and say, okay, this is Joe Biden's war, I'm done, because he didn't want to be blamed for losing the war. And it's like, but he acknowledges that they've lost the war. I mean, Donald Trump has put out that Ukraine is going to, like, Russia is going to take all of Ukraine in 2 or 3 years. And so Ukraine needs to come to a deal. Okay, well, you've acknowledged it's a proxy war, and you're acknowledging that Russia is going to take the entirety of Ukraine in 2 or 3 years. You're acknowledging you lost the war. And yet, they still can't bring themselves to accept reasonable terms to, we want to stop this for the long term, not a temporary ceasefire. It's just wild to me. I agree with you. They just, yeah, they don't seem to get it. What time is it? So last question before I let you go. Is there anything that has surprised you being in Russia for the time frame that you've been there?
Anything that surprised me?
Yeah.
Oh,
But anything that has stood out? Like, I've noticed when I've traveled to locations that there is, people are the same everywhere you go, but they're like these cultural differences sometimes that you notice depending upon where you are. I'm just curious. I've never been to Russia.
I've been to Russia a few times before, but anything that surprised me, I don't know.
Or that stood out, or that piqued your interest, like something.
Donetsk is a very beautiful city. I like Donetsk, which is, where the war is. Nice city. Obviously, Moscow, St. Petersburg are great places.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Siberia. Siberia is very interesting, like Baikal.
Have you?
Crimea is very beautiful. I really like Crimea. Very beautiful place. I don't know. War is war. I've covered a few other wars, so nothing really surprises me too much there.
Wow. Would you say war is war? Pretty much anywhere you go where there's a war, the mechanics of it are very similar.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same, very similar things, just different on their mise en scène, different, weapons used, and but there's a lot of uniqueness to this war as well. But yeah, I don't know. Moscow's summer's about to start. Very beautiful. There's a fantastic summer here. There was hardly any snow this winter. Almost no snow in Moscow this winter, and everyone's shocked. Everyone's thinking climate change must be real.
Really? I remember I was in Poland, this was years ago. It was like negative 20 degrees below zero. And the cab driver was like, yeah, it's not as cold this year. And they were attributing, and I'm like, what? Like, I'm in America, right? Like, the temperature for me is like just bone chilling, cold. Like you couldn't get away from it. And his thing was like, yeah, it used to be much worse. It used to be like negative 40. Yeah. This year wasn't that bad. And his thing was the temperature seems to be changing. So I guess it is. One last question. When you talk to the soldiers, what do they say? I mean, I would imagine they're motivated. I'd imagine they want this to be over with, but they want to complete it. Well, maybe I'm getting this wrong. Like, is there a consistent theme that comes up when you're talking to the soldiers?
No, not really. I mean, I was mainly in Donetsk with Donbass soldiers, and so very sort of Russian nationalist soldiers and Donbass soldiers. So Donbass soldiers, their families are getting, bombarded, etc. So they're very much fighting for their city, for their land. And the Russian nationalists are there to, some soldiers are. A lot of soldiers are very hugely politically educated. You could have some of these soldiers on your show, and they'd be as politically educated as you and other, and I remember talking to one soldier who was down in a trench with the bombs landing, and he was cooking. We've got a fat soldier, and he was cooking. Very friendly, nice guy. And I said to him, "What do you think of all this?" And he said, "Well, there's a lot of greed in the world. A lot of people trying to make money, all the rest of it, and I'm just here trying to stop that coming into my motherland." Yeah. And he said, "I don't really understand it. I think he basically did understand it, but just said it in a very simple way. But people fight for different reasons. You'll get a lot of soldiers who are there because the money is very good, and because they just sort of doing their duty. Yeah, I'll join the Russian army. I'll do my duty, make money. I can say that I did my job during the war. Maybe I can. Lots of different people, different reasons, but but also it's tough because soldiers have been there for a long time, not necessarily probably not getting as much holiday as they would like, and it is really tough there. So that's also why Russia will want to end the war. They will want to end the war. If Trump could have made a deal, they'd be very happy to make a deal. They want the war ended as soon as possible, but it has to effectively be on their terms.
Yeah, it has to be a good deal. Johnny, this has been an illuminating conversation. We have a really good crowd here today. I'm fascinated by this conversation. Just the frontline experience and being able to articulate what it's like being under artillery, under attacks on civilian infrastructure. The things and the conversations with the soldiers, like your personal experiences are fascinating. They just really are. Thank you for this. I really
Thank you so much,
it.
Jamal. Always great to speak to you.
And please be safe. I mean, to the degree that you can. I mean, you're pretty much in a war zone, but please be safe. Johnny Miller,
tomorrow's safe, yeah.
British journalist based in Moscow, spending much of the Ukraine war based and covering from Donbass. Thank you for this, man. You have a good one. Enjoy victory.
Same to you, Jamal.
Bye-bye. That is a fascinating conversation. I really did want them to send me to the location. I really did want to understand what the people were going through. I've met one person from the Donbass region, but when I met her, I didn't understand any of this. This was before I got into politics. She was in South Carolina, I believe. South Carolina, my ex-wife and I, we were on vacation. And we went into this little shop. The woman that was there, I talked to random people. My family hates it, but I do. And we got into this conversation where she was pointing out, she says, look, I just want the war to end. She says, I speak Russian. And from her point of view, okay, he's an American, so he's going to back the Ukrainian government. I didn't even understand what was taking place, let alone have a position one way or the other at the time that I was talking to her. And she just said, look, I speak Russian. My family speaks Russian. She says, she was talking about the number of people that had been killed that she knew. She said her mom was in a bomb shelter. They would go out just to get food and then come back to the bomb shelter because they were under bombardment by Ukraine. And, as you get more educated on it, what she's saying to you is making far much more context. When Johnny Miller is pointing out that he's at a cafe in the middle of the city in a purely civilian area, and they are bombing civilian areas, like this constant, consistent bombardment, just trying to kill civilians and threaten the civilian population. That is intense, right? That is intense. That's an experience that's hard to grasp. But I want to go to my next guest. I haven't seen him in a while. I'm glad that he can join me. Daniel Lazare. Daniel Lazare is an independent journalist, author, best known as a critic of the U.S. Constitution, American politics, government, and social policy in general. He has written several books, including The WWII, America's Undeclared War, and more. Daniel, man, welcome. How you doing, man? You doing okay this morning?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing good, and I'm glad that you could join me. Thank you for this. I would like to cover European politics. I have been annoyed, upset by the fact that Europe has taken this, as my last guest called it, childish position on the Great Patriotic War, Victory Day, whatever you want to call it. And from my point of view, the amount of blood that was shed in order to beat back the Nazis should be something that is sacred. And the fact that the world was able to come together to do it. France, America, Russia, or Soviet Union, China, the United States, all of these countries effectively formed a giant fist in order to beat back the Nazis. And Europe has taken this very different tact towards this, even going after people who want to go to travel to the parade and the celebrations. And this has taken a different form too. And just one last point. The way that they've wielded, let's say, far-right neo-Nazis or Banderites, or let's say far-right parties, to hurl against Russia in this way, even going after countries and, let's say, political parties that don't want to fall in line. So Romania being a really good example, Marie Le Pen being another example, the AfD in Germany being another example. The AfD, they've effectively called it, if not a criminal organization, but they put it under a heading that would allow further investigation into the organization, further oversight. Karlin Gorgescu, they got rid of him, but a person similar to him won the election. So there's that. And then you get Marie Le Pen and the party in France, the National Rally, who has also been skeptical of this conflict, where they've effectively criminalized Marie Le Pen, where she can't run for another 7 years, with the notion that her political party was most likely going to be the party to win it. That's astonishing. Give me your take on this strange turn of Europe in the way that they've been acting over the last several months or years.
Well, everything is falling apart in a really spectacular way. It's happening in this country. It's happening in Europe. It's happening other places as well. The neoliberal order is just going belly up in a way that I think is amazingly similar to the way the international communism went belly up in 1989 to 91. I mean, the Warsaw Pact suddenly disappeared.
Yeah.
This was a huge military force that supposedly, spread fear throughout Europe, and then suddenly it was no more. I think NATO is in big trouble, but even more important, the politics that NATO represents are in big trouble. The Romania is the latest, but really the best example so far, where they pulled out all stops to try to stop this far right candidate named Kalin Georgescu. Is that how you pronounce it? Georgescu?
Yes. Yeah. And as far as I know, Georgescu. Yeah.
Anyway, and they canceled the election. They banned him from running, and the maneuver backfired. Royally. And the reason and what's going on is that NATO is building the biggest military base on the Romanian Black Sea, the biggest military base in all of Europe, even bigger than Ramstein in Germany. It marks a dramatic eastward expression of a NATO firepower. It'll command the entire Black Sea. It's a highly aggressive move towards Russia, and it lies directly opposite the Russian naval base. It's Sevastopol, which I think is the real reason for this entire conflict. By the way, going back to 2014,
wait, real quick, explain that. You meaning basically taking over Ukraine with the idea of taking Sevastopol?
Yeah. I mean, Sevastopol is a naval base going back to Catherine the Great in the late 18th century. It's the most important naval base. It's probably Russia's most important naval base. And after Ukrainian independence, Russia operated it under a long-term lease from the Ukraine. It actually was in Ukrainian territory prior to 2014, and the whole purpose, one of the chief purposes of the Euromaidan putsch in February 2014 was essentially to eliminate that base, which would have eliminated, would have cut back dramatically Russian naval power. And of course, NATO is behind it. NATO is thirsting to take over Sevastopol and turn it into a NATO base. I mean, that would have been like one of the great, NATO victories. Yeah. The Germans succeeded in conquering Sevastopol in 1942 after a bloody siege that lasted 6 months, but NATO would have succeeded where Hitler had failed, but anyway, we know that that nationalist effort was beaten back, and Crimea came under Russian control, and Sevastopol was now under Russian control. But this base they're building in Romania will be directly opposite. So it really ups the confrontation, except that Georgescu, was as a fly in the ointment. He was highly NATO critical and appalled by the war in the Ukraine, and not unfriendly to Russia. And he was the leading candidate. So they zapped him, got him out of the race, but with the effect that a surrogate won handily. There's a runoff is still to go, but it looks like the surrogate George Simeon will win.
Yeah.
So it's a complete backfire, and the neoliberals just made fools of themselves. They wound up looking awful, but that's the stories repeated over and over and over again from throughout the West.
Yeah.
I mean, the Democrats made themselves look awful. I mean, by the Joe Biden scandal was one of the great cover-ups. It made Watergate look like small potatoes. I mean, you had this walking cadaver in the White House, and everybody. It was a Weekend at Bernie's. That's everyone. One of my favorite movies. That's that one. There, the image everyone invokes, but it was all covered up, but the Democrats wound up paying a huge price for that, a huge price. So.
Walking cadaver. That's hilarious. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. So so we have Trump. We have the attempt to bar Le Pen, which I'm sure will have the same effect. Mm-hmm. We have the AfD, which is surging in the polls, and the German establishment is moving to try to bar them as well. We had the Merz, who stumbled badly on the way to his confirmation as chancellor, which was a real embarrassment. We have the Reform Party. Farage is a Reform Party surging in Britain. So this old neoliberal establishment is just crumbling with amazing speed.
Do you think it's because, for the most part, you have a bureaucracy that's over, let's call them democracies or republics, for lack of a better word, parliamentary democracies, and the public gets what they're doing on some level, meaning they see, okay, these guys are gearing up for war. And when you get Keir Starmer and they ask him directly, hey, you realize, are you really prepared for a nuclear war with Russia? And he says, well, we need to stand up to the Russians. And it's like, okay, well, dude, you didn't really answer that, right? And people could see and say, whoa, this guy is gearing up for war, where the public is not on board for this. Like, meaning the leaders, maybe, you may get a Macron or Starmer or even Merz in Germany that may be gung-ho for some kind of military conflict with Russia. And you may even get the United States that is willing to feed Europe to the Russians. But the public itself, who has family members that's lived through the Second World War, it's like these people are out of their minds. In which case, they try to take democratic options to change it. And you get this kind of bureaucratic structure that is trying to stop these democratic movements, in which case those democratic movements harden. They get stronger. Like, let me ask you this way. I'm saying too many words. If indeed Europe seems to be gearing up for war, which it seems like they are, I mean, they're increasing military spending, as you pointed out, the base on the Black Sea in Romania. Do you think they're going to even be able to do that? I mean, considering what seems to be movements in these countries that seems to be against what these bureaucrats are trying to accomplish.
The answer is no. I think that Europe is much too divided. I think it's fracturing at this point. Countries like Romania, Hungary, and then France and Britain are pulling in one direction. The Baltic states and Poland are pulling in another direction. By the way, the far right is also making great gains in Poland as well. Mm-hmm. So the region is fracturing, and I don't believe that I don't believe that the EU NATO political structure is in any way capable of waging a war. It's just too cumbersome, too unwieldy, too unresponsive. It's a rickety mess. It's a house of cards. Yeah. But no, this war, World War III reminds me of World War I, which sort of came out of nowhere. I mean, did one person in 1,000 understand what was at stake in Sarajevo in June 1914? Not one in 1,000. In fact, historians are still puzzling over what happened. But suddenly, out of nowhere, this obscure dispute involving Austria, Russia, and this one crazy little country called Serbia suddenly blew up and consumed the entire continent. Now, not one person in 1,000 today understands where this dispute in the Ukraine came from. I mean, they have no idea. I mean, how did a border war, a border conflict, and a right-wing coup, how is this pitching all of Europe into a military crisis? Mm-hmm. I mean, the war in the Ukraine it's equally as obscure and as stupid as World War I. But yet there seemingly is no way out of this mess. That's just as there was seemingly no way out of the other mess in 1914 to 1918.
That's disturbing. I mean, I hope you're right that Europe is too much of a basket case to organize themselves into this kind of front. Give me your take on something else. Donald Trump is trying to pivot to China, but he's simultaneously trying to get Europe to effectively control and bolster NATO with this notion of division of concerns. Okay, we're going to do with China. We want to freeze this conflict. We want you, Europe, to effectively take the lead in it, and we will come back to it after we deal with China. That seems to be what the plan is for all of this talk about multipolarity. The U.S. doesn't seem to be giving up this notion of hegemony control, even if they're using the language of multipolarity. What is your take on that?
Well, I think a showdown with China is extraordinarily dangerous. I think that a military conflict with China would be
disastrous,
beyond comprehension. And I think that Trump understands that. I mean, one thing we know about Trump is actually is militarily somewhat cautious. He's not like Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden gave an interview a couple of days ago where he talked about the war in the Ukraine, and the guy is he's just a fool. Yeah. I mean, he dredged up all this anti-Soviet rhetoric. He said that that Putin wanted to carry Soviet conquests, back, towards the West. It was just ridiculous. So Trump is 10 times smarter than Biden. But the problem is that Trump is also a fool and could very easily stumble into a war with China. I mean, Trump's statement about World War II, his Victory Day statement, was extraordinary. I mean, the ignorance, the vicious ignorance is just amazing. I mean, to say that the U.S. won the war and therefore, deny 25 million or so Soviet war deaths. I mean, what is this other than Holocaust denial, right? Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. It's Holocaust denial times 4. The Soviet contribution to the defeat of Nazism is extraordinary. If ever there was a heroic moment in history, it was the Soviet war against the Nazis. And I'm believe me, I'm no Stalinist. I'm critical of Stalin to the nth degree. But what the Soviet people accomplished was extraordinary. We all stand in awe of their achievements, and to have Trump talk this way on the eve of the Victory Day celebration in Moscow is just it's extraordinary. I'm sure Putin is furious, and I'm sure this locks Putin and Xi together in an ever tighter alliance because they know that they're just dealing with a crazy man.
Yeah, Beaver's book, Berlin and Stalingrad, those books are just illuminating. And there's a quote in that book where he points out, I think it's at the very beginning, that what the Soviet soldier was willing to accept was something that was incomprehensible to Western troops. And his reason was, like, Western troops at a certain point feels like, okay, I've expended enough. I've done enough for my country. I've done enough in order to say, I'm good and I can surrender. And that really wasn't the case on the Eastern Front. There was no surrender. You were either going to die or you're going to fight. And in which case you had to continue to fight, regardless of the circumstance, regardless of the situations that you were in. I mean, it's incomprehensible. And so for Trump to say that nonsense, that America, who lost, 200,000 people, won the war, is absurd. It's just absurd.
But it's also profoundly offensive. It really is. I mean, it's as if it's as if someone said that that slavery was a picnic or that the Holocaust never happened. It's just extraordinary. And as I said, the Russians have reason to feel profoundly insulted and offended, and the Chinese did too. Yeah. I mean, the Chinese were part of this war effort. I mean, the Chinese casualties I think are actually even higher than the Russian Soviet casualties were, and to this day in China they still sing patriotic Soviet World War II songs, and so I mean, this has locked Xi and Putin in a tight race.
Wow. It's just amazing to me that this has been taking place in this way. Maybe you know this. Why did Khrushchev give the Ukraine? I mean, why did Khrushchev give Ukraine Crimea?
The Crimea. That's I actually do know something about that.
Please.
First of all, Khrushchev was of the opinion that the old Soviet republics didn't matter. That essentially the Soviet people had merged into one, Homo Sovieticus. That's the phrase, and so therefore, Ukrainians, Russians, there was travel back and forth. If you visited Leningrad or Moscow, you saw Central Asians. If you went to Kiev, you saw Russians. So Khrushchev believed that the old national boundaries in between Russia, Ukraine, didn't matter any more than a boundary between New Jersey and New York matters, right? But also there were certain administrative things. They were building a large dam on the Dnieper River. They thought that the administration would be easier if it was under Ukrainian control. So it was a purely administrative maneuver, and also, it was seen as a gift to the Ukraine. But also, someone also might argue that in a more Machiavellian way, that by folding in Russian population into the Ukraine, you would essentially diminish Ukrainian national sentiment. So those are all a bunch of different reasons. But in 1954, Khrushchev gifted the Crimea to the Ukraine. But it didn't matter until after independence. Then suddenly it mattered a great deal. The boundary between New York and New Jersey doesn't matter at all. But if those two states became somehow independent and were at war with one another, then suddenly it would matter enormously.
But all of those things at one point under Tsarist Russia were Russia. And as you pointed out, the Sevastopol goes back to like 100, 200 years. I mean, more than 200 years.
It's as old as this country. It goes back to the 1780s.
Wow. It's just wild to me that this is historical context, right? That is lacking when we talk about this stuff. And it's just wild to me. That's all.
But also the Crimea, though, was no one ever considered the Crimea to be part of the Ukraine. I mean, linguistically, geographically, it was always seen as part of Russia. It would, but the transfer of Ukraine was an insignificant detail that no one bothered about until suddenly everyone bothered about. And also since independence by the Ukraine, since independence in 91, the Crimea has been pushing nonstop for reunion with Russia.
With Russia.
Yeah.
Wow, that is fascinating. How do you think this war is going to ultimately end? I mean, there was a lot of, I got to be honest, I was optimistic when Trump got in, because Trump kept saying, I want to end the war, I'm going to end the war. And then I saw his peace deal, and I was like, okay, this is ludicrous. He's not trying to end the war if this is the deal that he's coming up with. The Russians are winning on the battlefield. Trump acknowledges it's a proxy war. He acknowledges that in 2 or 3 years, Russia's going to take it all. That's assuming they even want it all. I don't think they do, but whatever. Which means you're acknowledging that you've effectively lost a proxy war, and yet he's putting out a deal from a position of strength that he doesn't ultimately have.
Okay.
Please give me your take on this.
I mean, ending the war is simultaneously very easy and supremely difficult. Yeah. I mean, the simple solution is Finlandization. First of all, as you know, Finland and Russia fought a nasty little war in 1939 to 40.
In the snow, people in skis. Yeah. What is it? The line? I can't think of the name of the guy. I can't think of the line, but please continue.
Okay. And Russia, the Soviets eventually won, but the Soviets, their military performance was really pretty disgraceful.
Oh yeah.
And then in 1941, Finland joined the Nazi offensive against Russia, and Finnish troops took part in the siege of Leningrad, in which roughly 1 million civilians died from starvation. And then in 1944, when Finland saw which way the wind was blowing, it changed sides. So afterwards, Finland, stood to be severely punished by the Soviets for taking part in the siege of Leningrad. But the Soviets actually hammered out a fairly good arrangement where the Finns were told that that their foreign policy should be very careful in terms of foreign policy, not to offend the Soviets. So therefore, every year the Finnish post office, issued a postage stamp on Lenin's birthday. And they were. Are you serious? Oh yeah. And the Finnish Communist Party was a major force, and the Finnish president, would be chosen with not the prime minister, but the president, would be chosen so he would not offend the Soviets, and they were studiously neutral in terms of foreign policy. Right. But this was a golden age for Finland. Its economy became one of the richest in the world. I was actually there in 1972. It was.
Were you?
Oh yeah, it was a glorious place. A glorious place. I mean, the people are gorgeous. The countryside is gorgeous. The farms were overflowing with produce. The cities were modern. It was completely culturally free. It was glorious. But they lived next door to a big powerful neighbor, and they had to sort of tread somewhat cautiously. But you don't think it's any different from than Mexico? Mexico doesn't have to tread cautiously with the United States, and so that is the outcome. I mean, essentially, Ukraine has got to recognize that those Western territories are gone for good. The Eastern territories, I'm sorry, just as Finland relinquished territory to the Soviets. It's got to demilitarize, say goodbye to NATO. Membership in the EU, I suppose, is a possibility. That's up for negotiations. That's less provocative. Yeah. And they've got to debanderize. Get rid of all those Nazi street signs and Nazi monuments, and no longer have stop children in schools singing, Ukraine is my mother, Bandera is my father. So they've got to denazify and essentially acknowledge that they will be sensitive to Russian priorities. The same thing that Finland did, and the same thing that Mexico does. I mean, this is this is the way international politics works. But they will not do that. In fact, if Zelensky does give up those territories, essentially the Azov battalion, this is the neo-Nazi battalion that is increasingly powerful within the Ukrainian military, will string him up from the nearest lamppost with a sign around his chest saying, Jewish traitor.
Yeah.
I mean, and that is the future. Now, so this war is not going to end. That's the horror. Wars are easy to start and really hard to finish, and this war is not going to end. So hundreds of thousands more will die. Eventually, the Ukraine will crack under the pressure, and Russian forces will advance. But when that happens, there could be explosions in Eastern Europe. We have the political crisis in Europe will accentuate, or let's there's also a possibility. I think it's much less likely, but certainly a possibility of Russia cracking. I mean, the Russian, we saw with the Wagner battalion.
Prigozhin,
Prigozhin. The Russian structure is not totally stable either. But in any case, this is not going to end well. It's going to drag on. The crisis is going to intensify. The war will intensify, and millions, hundreds of thousands more will be sacrificed. And for what? Because the Americans backed a neo-Nazi coup in February 2014. I mean, this is all Victoria Nuland's fault, essentially.
This is so pointless. Just send Putin a post-it on his birthday. Stamp. Give Putin a stamp on his birthday.
Yeah. I don't want to let Putin off the hook. I mean, believe me. I mean, you just don't invade other countries.
But what are you supposed to do? Like, if no one has ever given me an alternative for that. You get a situation where a neo-Nazi group overthrow a country on your border. NATO is directly involved in it. They're taking options to surround your country, creating this kind of Hobbes choice where they want to use Ukraine as a platform to invade. What do you do?
Yeah, and the invasion hasn't worked either very well. But you're right. I mean, there's no doubt that Russia was maneuvered into a war. I
guess what I'm asking is, what is the political solution to that? Europe is telling you, hey, you don't get security guarantees. We don't even have to listen to you. And I suspect a lot of this has to do with the Soviet Union collapsing, where they think Soviet Union collapsed, Russia's a gas station or a gas can masquerade as a country. They're Nigeria with snow. That is the way that Europe was thinking about this. If you remember, Putin was putting out a plan saying, hey, here's my plan for new security architecture of Europe. Let's talk about it. They were like, we don't have to talk about it. We don't care. We don't care what your plan is. And even when they put out the Minsk agreements, 1 and 2, Hollande comes out, we lied. We did these agreements purely allow Ukraine to build up the largest military in Europe. Meaning, if you're the Russian president and you see them doing this, and they are blowing you off in every turn where you're trying to have some kind of negotiations, what do you do?
You're absolutely right. You're completely correct, and there is a certain kind of inevitability to this whole thing. The Soviets, I believe that 40 border wars broke out in the former Soviet Union starting in 1989. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were vicious little wars everywhere. Most of them didn't even make the news. Abkhazia was one, for example. This is breakaway province in what was once northern Georgia. Yeah. That was a war that erupted in 91, 92. That was a vicious little conflict, absolutely vicious. And there were other border conflicts, and essentially the U.S. had a finger in many of these things. We know the U.S. neocons were backing the Islamic fundamentalists in the second Chechen war. So they were encouraging this. And then in 1998, Zbig Brzezinski came out with this bestseller, very unusual for a foreign policy book to be a bestseller, called The Grand Chessboard, in which he outlined a sweeping strategy in which the U.S. would arm Ukraine, break Russia up into 3 separate entities, gain unrestricted access to Central Asia and its natural resources, and then use that geographical advantage to confront China from 3 sides.
Yeah.
In other words, from Central Asia, from Siberia under the control of a Russian U.S.-controlled Russian neo-colony, and from the South China Sea. So the whole purpose of the Brzezinski strategy was to break up Russia and solve the China problem once and for all. And that was clear, and that's clear. It's all there in black and white, and this is not paranoia. Brzezinski laid it out quite clearly, and Brzezinski was a huge factor in U.S. foreign policy, in some ways rivaling that of Kissinger. So
that's my point, right? Like, these people are sociopaths. And so if you were in Russia and you're watching this, hell, Putin might have even read the book, right? And you're seeing this, and there's no political out. Like, that's what I'm stuck with. Because I agree with you. This war is senseless. And I remember being at the radio station thinking to myself, all of these people are dying. For what? And it's geopolitical interests.
It's really capitalism. I mean, essentially, in 1991, with the advent of the unipolar war, the U.S. saw that it had an opportunity to do what no other imperial power had ever done before. That was to conquer the entire globe.
Yeah.
I mean, Alexander the Great set out to conquer the globe and conquered a fairly big piece of it, but it was not the entire globe. Yeah. But the U.S. set out to conquer the entire globe, and at the time it didn't seem to be unrealistic. And so the U.S. essentially, just steamroller, was determined to steamroll over any opposition. And when Yeltsin was a handmaid to U.S. power. When he finally is stiffened, his back stiffened, and he appointed Putin to take his place, the U.S. was hostility, started rising immediately. In December 2012, Muammar Gaddafi, if you recall, was killed by a mob,
sodomized with a machete
in October 2012. I hope I'm getting my dates right. And in December 2012, Hillary Clinton informed Putin that his running of elections was intolerable. And I think that Putin quite reasonably interpreted that as a threat. In other words, watch out, because you're next.
Yeah.
Right. And U.S. behavior grew increasingly aggressive, provocative. The U.S. ambassador was openly stirring up opposition. I mean, imagine if the Russian ambassador in the U.S. was running around the country, meeting with radical groups, encouraging, anti-Washington demonstrations, and a deep freeze settled in on U.S.-Russian relations, and of course the duel for power in the Ukraine was the next step that erupted in November 2013. That was 11 months after Hillary Clinton's message to Putin that you're next. And so, and as we know, that the neocons were in the front line, of that effort. Even as the New York Times for one example, was reporting that that far right fascist elements were leading this budding coup d'état, but the U.S. pressed on relentlessly. And then the result was that the Ukraine fractured, and the eastern territories broke away, and suddenly, there was war. But the U.S. there was war because the U.S. wanted Russia to just collapse before this American steamroller, and when Russia didn't, the U.S. amped up the firepower.
Daniel Lazare. Daniel, fantastic interview. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. We have a great crowd, and the crowd kept growing the more you talk. Just like up and up and up and up. Thank you for this, man. I really appreciate it. Great breakdown, great historical context, all of it. Just fantastic. Daniel Lazare, independent journalist, author, best known as a critic of the U.S. Constitution and American politics, government, and social policy in general. He's written several books. Definitely check him out. The Velvet Coup, America's Undeclared Empire, and more. You can follow Daniel on X at DH You can find his column on weeklyworker.co.uk and many other locations. Daniel, man, fantastic. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
You have a good day.
Same to you.
All right. I would like to go from one damn good guest to another damn good guest. Esteban Carrillo, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today? You doing all right?
Jamarl, yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing great. Then hello to everyone also who's joining us.
Absolutely. Esteban, he's Ecuadorian journalist, currently writing for The Cradle, previously with Telesur English. I'm glad you could join me today, Esteban. So a few things have been taking place that I came across. One is from The Cradle itself, actually, and maybe both of these things are related to one another. So The Cradle came out with this article pointing out that Syria is being UAE brokered a secret deal, rapprochement, as they call it, between Israel and Syria. Now, I could argue that this rapprochement had already been in effect, considering that Syria, despite being bombed by Israel, wouldn't fire a shot in anger.
Exactly.
Despite the fact that they were destroying Damascus and everything else. And even recently, as the Syrian government, well, the jihadi government, was going after the Druze community, where they were effectively murdering Druze, and Israel starts bombing the hell out of Syria as a result, because the Druze community effectively was pissed off. Israel was backing the Druze. I don't understand the politics in this. This is a little bit more granular than I understand it from this distance, but you explained this to me, actually, and HTS was being bombed by Israel because of that. Yeah. Again, they wouldn't fire a shot in anger at Israel, meaning these jihadists who would go and murder civilians wouldn't touch the Israelis, despite the fact that they've taken territory.
Exactly.
And then you get the jihadi president here in France getting like state honors in France, with them whitewashing this kind of ethnic cleansing that's taking place in Syria. Look at this. That is amazing.
That is, picture of the decade.
That is like, that piece, that is astonishing, considering what is happening in Syria with the minority communities and with his goons going through killing minorities.
Exactly.
So they are buddies with Israel now. Is that what we are to understand? Because I don't believe Israel sees them that way, but at the very least, there's some kind of ceasefire that's happening between Israel, Turkey, and what's left of Syria.
Yeah, well, Shara, the guy you just showed, Julani, the chameleon, he yesterday he confirmed these talks, right? Because what we had published was this report from I forget the source, but that the UAE was mediating, and we know the UAE, first of all, is very tight with Israel. The UAE and Israel two peas in a pod, and and the Gulf also very involved in Syria, right? So the UAE kind of mediating. And yesterday, Shara, after his meeting with Macron, he confirms there are indirect negotiations, and he says they are meant to de-escalate tensions and prevent a loss of control. I'm not sure what he means by that. Like Israel last week bombed right outside his house.
Yes.
Yes. They've been bombing, pretty much wherever they want at this point. So he's he really is like the perfect. He's playing the perfect role, right, of this Western-like official with the double speak, with the not actually doing anything but appearing like he's doing something, and very sharply dressed, of course, Ahmed Al-Shara.
Beautiful suit.
Yeah. Like I'm sure the shopping trip in Paris must have been insane for him.
Yeah, I know.
In any case,
right?
It's really okay. So the rapprochement talks, right? Yeah. Not surprising at all. Apparently, we just saw this actually earlier today. Haaretz reported that a delegation from the Giuliani government secretly visited Israel in late April, so just a few weeks ago. And the delegation included a senior defense official and figures from the province Cunetria in the south, around where the Druze are located, where you're referring to. So obviously there's this a path towards normalization, right? Let's call it what it is. We said rapprochement in our headline. What it really is leading towards is normalization. Shara was asked a few weeks ago too, like, would you normalize with Israel? And he didn't say no. He didn't say yes. Like I said, he's towing the line pretty well. But we know from their actions that they will normalize at the end of the day. As you said, Israel right now is occupying a 500 square kilometer area in the south of Syria. Is looking to take control of the Druze villages. A few weeks ago, the Israeli authorities said we're not going to allow any armed presence south of Damascus. Right. So that's an occupation, right? And if they normalize, they're gonna Israel's gonna keep that territory, right? There's no.
I wouldn't call it an occupation. I would call it an annexation, because he is not going to do anything about it. Meaning, it's not like he is saying, oh my God, I can't believe Israel's taking parts of Syria. He hasn't said anything about it one way or the other. Israel just took it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and they destroyed their, Syria's military infrastructure entirely. And now the visit to France, which I think is just so fascinating, because Shara/Giuliani, up until 4 months ago, had a $10 million bounty on his head for terrorist activities. He is the former founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria. He is the deputy commander of the founder of ISIS. Yeah. He was in Iraqi prison in between 2009 and 2011 for terrorist activities. And and in France also, right? Like France, just a few years ago, it was like the site of an attack by ISIS. And but we know that France has, for the past 15 years, since the start of the dirty war in Syria, they've been one of the main backers. At one point, this giant cement company in France, Lafarge, was selling cement directly to ISIS, was providing them with building materials so that ISIS could build tunnels and overcome the attacks, from the Russian Air Force. And this is all in court documents at this point, because Lafarge was taken to court from taking money from ISIS, from a proscribed terrorist organization. Don't expect too much to come out of that at the end of the day. Like I said, like now the deputy commander of the founder of ISIS is sitting in the Élysée Palace, shaking hands with Emmanuel Macron and normalizing. Macron essentially saying we're going to call for the lifting of sanctions. He also saying we need to, do something, I guess, about these massacres that are happening in Syria. All virtue signaling, all window dressing, just empty rhetoric. Worth mentioning that the Lebanese president was also in Paris yesterday, Joseph Aoun, likely also met with Shara. Because there's been clashes too between the Lebanese army and these former ISIS thugs that call themselves now the Syrian army. So all of these movements are happening, right? But at the end of the day, like I said, the path is towards normalization with Israel.
HTS is made up of multiple groups, though. It's not an individual group. And I remember at one of the meetings, somebody at one of those groups asked them, hey, are we going to do something about Israel? And he says, not right now, because we don't have the power to do it. Israel can't be all that easy with HTS. And will HTS even accept him normalizing relations with Israel? Meaning, does that damage his credibility among some of the groups that make up HTS and, as you said, call themselves now the new Syrian army? Would they be okay with that?
Yeah, completely. Because HTS is okay. It's different factions. You're right. It's a bit of an umbrella, I guess. But at the end of the day, these are all were mainly foreign jihadists or former elements in the Syrian army. From like back when the civil war started, that accepted living under this system, right? Under the caliphate, under the ISIS caliphate that was in a way established in Idlib, right, where HTS ruled. HTS, right, let's remember, is simply the rebranding, right? They went from Al-Qaeda in Syria to the Nusra Front to a name that I can't remember right now, and then to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS. Right. So it's just rebranding, right? And now to the Syrian government, right? They rebranded like one final time. But among the Sunni extremists, the most, the Salafi elements, the maniacs, right? The ISIS maniacs who believe that strapping on a bomb and walking into a mosque to kill Shiites, it's the path to heaven, or that who are currently taking, sexual slaves, like young Alawite women as sex slaves, who are massacring Alawites, who are, like trying to massacre Druze, but are a bit running into a wall in that regard. They don't really, they're not there, to wage war against Israel, against the occupation entity. They are there to take control of land, to expand their territory. They're perfectly fine with Israel, because at the end of the day, Israel has proven to be an ally to them, right? Like a few years ago, HTS even received after one of the clashes during the war, they received medical treatment in Israel.
I saw.
Right? Yeah, so no, I don't think so. I don't think there will be like an internal strife, right? If anything, it's gonna be about the fact that he's trying, that Shara keeps promising inclusivity. He keeps promising, what's the word, to kind of keep things quiet, one would say, to stop the massacres, to stop the ethnic cleansing. I think that would be a bigger point of contention between, all of these former ISIS and Al-Qaeda members than, we're not going to go and wage war against Israel. Like, they go and wage war against what's left of Hezbollah before they even think about waging war against Israel, or against Iran, or against Shiite militias in Iraq. Like their list of enemies is pretty long before you actually get to Israel. So I don't see that as being much of an issue.
There was another story that came out that is disturbing on its face. This one, with the U.S. apparently discussing taking over the administration of Gaza. The thought being that the U.S. would, I guess, control Gaza up until a new government is formed, which is pretty amazing. I mean, they're effectively saying, hey, Palestinians can't run themselves. It requires U.S. administration. And for whatever reason, Israel, it's just this is a wild post. That's all. Give me your take on this.
It has been that, what's happening in Gaza right now, it can only be really described as the final solution, right? This is what's happening in Gaza is, well, first of all, total destruction. At this point, it really is no food at all. Today, like the last communal kitchens closed because literally no more food.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen next is they're going to be pushed, the Palestinians. This is what, when they announced the total conquest of Gaza a few days ago, when Israel approved these plans, what they mean is they're going to come in and they're going to try to push the 2 million Palestinians, or around 2 million who are still there, to the south, right, to Rafah, where everything has been flattened, where there's really just nothing left. So they're going to be just a mass there. And this is what the U.S., or what this report is talking about this administration. It doesn't mean, the Palestinians will be allowed to return to where their homes used to be, and then the United States will impose an administration over Gaza. No, it means they will run the concentration camp that is being established in Gaza right now, and distribute aid, right? And the terms of these are what they're discussing is like no Palestinian is going to be allowed to be in control, neither Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority. And also they're talking about a U.S. official. They haven't said who, maybe they'll just dump this on Marco Rubio as well. Since he seems to be, Trump's go-to guy at this point. But that's the idea. And the idea, it hasn't changed from the beginning, Jamarl. It's been very, like, we've taken a lot of turns, and it's probably taking a lot more than what the Israelis expected initially. But the end is going to be the same that it was from the beginning, right? From the very beginning, they were talking about pushing the Palestinians to the Sinai in Egypt and of taking control of Gaza themselves, right? Like rebuilding the settlements. You had the finance minister just a few days ago come out in a conference and said we need to stop being afraid of the word occupation, and Gaza is going to be totally destroyed and there's not going to be anyone left. Yeah. And that rhetoric, those statements, they align exactly with what the statements were from officials at the beginning of the genocide, which was, the children of Amalek, the human animals, complete destruction, no electricity, no food, just a siege. Nothing has changed. The only thing, that has changed, I would say, is the perception of what's happening in Gaza. I feel like that is continuing to change, because at the beginning you had a number of people, I would include you and me among those, calling it what it was, right? What's happening in Gaza, an ethnic cleansing campaign. And now what you're seeing is kind of like that starting to finally land in some other people's heads, in the, politicians, media outlets, etc. Like you had the FT, right? Financial Times this week put out this editorial in which they condemn the Western silence on Gaza, which is very surprising, although completely late, incredibly late.
It's like we're a year and a half into it, and they're like, "Hey,
and like
something's
now, right?
happening in Gaza. That's pretty shameful."
Now,
Right.
time. So we wait a bit more. Maybe a few more dead children would be good. So we can, we're not called anti-Semites. You had this British member of parliament also, right? You must have seen the video of him, and that he was talking about, like, I always supported Israel, but now I realize I'm wrong, and we need to call for an end to this. Baby steps still, but the perception is changing, right? And I mean baby steps in the sense of look at the destruction, right? And look at what they're actually about to do. Like right now, they are calling up reservists to send them back into Gaza and implement the final solution. That's it, right? Like there's no other way. There's no other word for it. This is not a war. This hasn't been a war for a year and a half. This is not about terrorism. What's terrorism if it's not bombing a hospital or bombing a humanitarian shelter or UN vehicles or ambulances? That's terrorism, right? Yeah. If the word means anything, it's that. So the US comes in with this plan that we're going to run. They're going to run the concentration camp where the Palestinians are going to be trapped. And now we know that the United States is really has become really interested, or involved in concentration camps, right? You have the Segot in El Salvador, and now you have them talking with Libya, Ukraine, and Rwanda about taking these migrants that are just being arrested randomly in the US. So what's another concentration camp? What's another, black site prison to run?
They asked Trump, hey, are you sending migrants to Libya? Think about that for the moment. Let's say you are a migrant from Ecuador.
Yeah.
And the Trump administration is like, okay, I'm going to send you to Libya.
To Libya?
How the hell does that, that is mind-blowing. And by the way, illegal, right? There's no way that is legal. And yet, he's still probably going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, he's reviving the slave market. That's what it is. Because in Libya, you had, since the NATO involvement in that country, you had open-air slave markets. What does that mean, right? You're going to send... in El Salvador, these people are already being sent as slaves, right? They're free labor for the Salvadorian government. And now you have them in Libya, right? In Libya, you already have open-air slave markets. So if you're a migrant going to the US, you might actually end up at a slave market for absolutely no reason, just because I guess it's profitable to someone.
And they asked Trump, hey, are you doing that? He was like, I don't know. It is really hard to get across how absurd this presidency is, where the president seems to be out of touch with what is taking place. For example, they asked them to say, hey, J.D. Vance says that the Russians are just are making maximalist demands. He was like, really? Maybe you know something I don't. What? You're the president. And then apparently Hegseth on its own, decided not to give Ukraine armaments. And Trump didn't know that Hegseth is the one that effectively stopped weapons going to Ukraine for a period of time. How are you the president and so out of touch with everything that's taking place? Hey, do you think people should get due process? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. What?
Yeah, I don't think he believes that anyway. I'm sorry. But no, like actually one of the most interesting things was this what happened with Mike Waltz. And I know we discussed this a few days ago, the last time I was on your show, but what I wanted to add to that is that today, Israel Hayom, right, this Hebrew news outlet, comes out with a report saying that right now Trump is disappointed in Netanyahu and doesn't even want to involve him in anything because of the Mike Waltz situation. Right, because Mike Waltz, before being booted, he was having apparently intense talks with Israel, with Netanyahu behind Trump's back about an attack on Iran, and that didn't fly. That apparently didn't really sit well with him. And now look at what happened this week, right? We haven't had a chance to talk about it. When Trump says that Yemen gave up, right? He comes out and says, the Houthis are tired of us bombing them. They don't want us to be bombing them anymore, so they gave up. A complete fabrication. But
he's lying to his teeth.
Exactly. But the really most important part about that is he doesn't inform Israel. And not only does he not inform Israel, he doesn't include them in the ceasefire agreement with Yemen. So essentially telling the Israelis, you know what, you deal with them because we are done. And it's really funny because at the end of the day, the United States comes into this war to protect Israeli vessels, right? They say that it's for freedom of navigation and for global commerce and, capitalism and whatever. In reality, it's like to protect the Israeli vessels and Israeli cities that were getting bombed by Yemen. That's the aim, right? They spend billions, they wait a year and 3 months, and then they withdraw without achieving the goal and just like essentially taking their ships and leaving the Israelis to their fate in the Red Sea.
By the way, I have that clip. Because I ran this the other day with one of my guests, Tim Anderson, and it is one of the funniest things in the world. Trump's like, "Oh, Yemen capitulated. They gave up. They got tired of fighting." He says they're brave and blah blah blah. And then the reporter asked them this:
the Houthis are backing down. We're seeing conflicting reports that they plan on continuing to attack Israel in support of Gaza. Does that change the equation?
No, I don't know about that, frankly, but I know one thing: they want nothing to do with us, and they've let that be known through all of their surrogates, and very strongly.
So effectively, well, look, they stopped attacking American ships, so that's all we care about. That's what we've agreed. We don't attack them; they don't attack us. We're calling it a day. We're taking our ships and we're leaving. And it's like, hey, but they're still attacking Israel. I don't know anything about that. That's an amazing clip. Right, because it means that the Houthis still are doing what they said they were going to do in the first place. We were having an air and sea blockade on Israel. That's what we're going to do. And the U.S., despite all of the bombing, has not been able to change us from doing that.
Exactly. So, the report from today essentially says he's losing patience. Trump is pretty much sick at this point. And in particular, it's regarding Saudi Arabia, right? Because remember that the U.S. and Saudi Arabia have been talking about an expanded defense treaty for Israel for a while now, right? And even remember, one of the driving forces behind the Al-Aqsa flood operation by Hamas and others on October 7, 2023, was first of all the Israeli violations at Al-Aqsa Mosque. That's top. The second one was the normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, right? Which was imminent. Remember at that point, I remember very clearly, the end of September, around September 30, 2023. They were talking like this is a done deal. We're just going to sign in a few days. Then Al-Aqsa flood happens, and what happened next. And the United States has since then been trying to kind of pick up the pieces of this deal, right? And at the same time, Saudi Arabia took part in the BRICS summit a few days ago, in the Foreign Minister Summit, although they are not a part of BRICS, Saudi Arabia. They haven't formally committed, but they also haven't formally said no. They're just right there in between. So Trump wants, the Saudis on his side completely, and the Saudis want to be on the U.S. side completely, but Israel keeps being the stone in their shoe, the pebble in the shoe, by not doing anything besides killing Palestinians, right? And this is not to say that the Saudi Arabian government cares about Palestinians. They care about the optics of being, the guardians of the two holiest places in Islam, to be the ones normalizing with a genocidal regime that is killing Arabs, Sunni Arabs, not because I'm guessing if the Palestinians were mainly Shia, the normalization would have already been signed. But since they're Sunnis, it makes things much more complicated for them. So now Trump losing patience because Israel's holding up the deal with the Saudis, and is making him look bad at the end of the day. Like I said, there is a very continuous movement towards realizing that what's happening in Gaza needs to be condemned, right? By the Israel's most ardent supporters. Even they are starting to wonder, I don't want to be complicit in the death of so many children. So I would say that even Donald Trump, to some degree, is probably, feeling feeling tired about the situation, I would say, because he started his government with a ceasefire, right? Even before he came to power, exactly, it wasn't really much of a ceasefire, but for the New York Times, Washington Post, Fox News, CNN, etc., they could call it a ceasefire, and be happy with it. Yeah. He could call it a ceasefire and be happy with it. But now we're back to a situation that is worse than what it was at the end of Biden's presidency. And at some point, that's going to reflect on Donald Trump, right? And now, if they want the U.S. to have this administration of Gaza, I also don't think this is going to involve deploying U.S. troops to Gaza, right? Probably not. What it means is like they talk about an Arab coalition, right? So, and what is an Arab coalition going to look like? It's probably going to be like a bunch of these ISIS people who are in the prisons in Syria, or like mercenaries, maybe Eric Prince, maybe his companies, maybe from Africa, right? Maybe they'll get like their thugs from Somalia or etc. to come and play guards in this concentration camp. But what they need is the optics. They need the optics of the Saudi deal, and the money from it, and they need the optics of the ceasefire, and they need, they want diplomacy. They say they want diplomacy to work with Iran, which I believe it for now. It feels like this is a decision that works to them at this point. I don't know if this is a decision that will work for them, down the line, because the whole war creep, for example, between India and Pakistan also feels like it's an attempt to ignite wars that are closer to that side of the world than to Israel.
Mm-hmm. The India-Pakistan thing is complicated to me.
Understand
because if 26 Americans were killed, we'd lose our minds also. Mm-hmm. And I've had conversations with both reporters from India and from Pakistan. They are in two different worlds in regards to what's happening. One would say they think it's a false flag that India murdered. They would go so far as to say India murdered its own people in order to create a pretext for war. That is a heavy lift for me to accept. By the same token, India is like Pakistan has been working with all of these terrorist groups, which is true, by the way. I think Pakistan would even admit that. And
you must have seen the clip from the defense minister in which he said we've been doing this dirty work from the US and the West for
exactly
the past 30
right.
years.
Yeah, he's like, we've been doing it for the West for years, right?
Yeah.
Which is fascinating that they would admit something like that. The reason he was doing it, though, he was trying to indict the reporter, because the reporter is sitting there with this kind of Western arrogance. Yeah, but you've been, working with terrorist groups, right? Yeah, for you. We've been working with them for you. Yeah, so I think he was trying to indict them. And India's point is like, dude, you've been running terrorist attacks in India for years. And regardless of the information that we put out to prove it, regardless of, and this is the Indian perspective, right? When they were explained, nobody has done anything about it. Meaning if these were Americans, Europeans that were killed, the world would be in outrage. But because they're Indians, they're brown, you don't care. So we have the military power to deal with this ourselves. We're not going to give this information out any more than the U.S. would give information out if their citizens were killed. We're going to respond. And Pakistan is saying this is outrageous. You've attacked us. Mm-hmm. And it just escalated and escalated and escalated. And at this point, apparently Pakistan used a Chinese missile to shoot down the Indian plane, at the very least one. They're saying that India media reported 3. Okay, fair enough. Mm-hmm. India has been firing missiles into Pakistan at this point. Pakistan apparently has responded with missiles of their own.
India has been launching Israeli drones, like Israeli suicide drones. That's what they said this morning.
Yes. Yeah, I saw the images of it. So this is just escalating. And I have to think that if the Victory Day parade wasn't taking place, that Putin and Xi Jinping would be intensely trying to get this to stop in regards to diplomacy.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the Iranian foreign minister was in Pakistan until yesterday. Now he's in India.
mhm.
So he's kind of taking the flag, right?
Well, they've
diplomacy.
signed a deal, actually.
Mhm.
I think I have a clip of that, where the Pakistani minister, I'm sorry, not the Pakistani minister, India, where is it? Where is it? I have so many of these screens up. But if I'm not mistaken, they signed some kind of economic partnership between each other yesterday, India and Iran, just kind of out the blue.
Yeah. I mean,
Just-
you know,
Here we are.
they are BRICS partners, Iran and India.
That is true. No, you're right. That is true. They signed a strategic partnership. I have to believe that this war is not what any of these groups, be it India, be it Iran, China.
No, I don't think that they really want war, right? The Iranians don't want war.
No.
That's apparent. And I don't know about the Indians, to be honest. Like you said, Pakistan, India, it's complicated, but you do know that the Indian government is a bit extreme, to say the least.
Explain this to me. Okay, so go into it. Because some of my audience members would even say this is a false flag. And my thing is like, okay, well, what is the reason that India would want a war
Okay,
with
so
Pakistan?
yeah, well, I'm not an expert here, but you know, it's pretty well understood that the Indian government is a Hindu nationalist, right?
Right.
Like these people are very much, I would say, anti-Muslim to some
Very
degree.
intense. Yeah.
They do persecute them. They do see themselves as superior, and we know Pakistan is an Islamic republic, right? So this is where you see kind of the closeness that exists between India and the Israeli government. Right, like they're very close. They're very friendly. They arm them. You know, Israeli weapons are present in India. They're being used, as we said. So this is
But that's
like a
different than
very
wanting a
easy
war.
conflict to ignite. Right?
Yeah, but that's different than wanting a war. Like, meaning it's a heavy, like it's one thing to say, okay, well, these guys are Hindu nationalists and they don't like Muslims. Fair enough. Fair enough. It's another thing to say that they murdered 26 of their own to create a pretext to attack Pakistan. And it's like, to what end? Is it to take territory? Is it to...
Yeah, I don't, you know, that's interesting. Is it to take territory? Is it to, you know, push Pakistan from the side of Kashmir and Jammu that they control?
Yeah, right.
Is it that? I wouldn't be so perplexed or shocked to find out that India did it on their own, because we've known, like, you know, states are not afraid to go in and just like kill their own people for a purpose. Again, you know, the easiest example always going to be Israel. What happened on October the 7th was mostly Israeli-caused deaths. The Hannibal Directive.
That was Israel under attack, where they were responding just in a rabid fashion, murdering their own citizens in response.
Yeah,
this is tourists, civilians.
Yeah, but here's what's interesting, right? Like, who actually did the attack, right? Who did the attack? Because you had them blame the resistance front, I think it was called, this group, a Kashmiri separatist or a resistance faction. And then they come out a few days after, you know, it said that it's them, then saying it wasn't us, we got hacked, our accounts got hacked, the statement that came out, it wasn't from us. So you know, there's many questions really at the end of the day. I think in my perspective, the whole situation with India and Pakistan is just trying to ignite a front that is closer to China, right? Like, it's the war creep towards China. This is where we're headed. I don't think Donald Trump is rethinking a war against China. I think he rethinks war against Iran a lot. But I think there's like this concerted effort from the United States that they need to have this war against China. I don't even think because they think they can win, but just because they need to ignite a war, right? They need to like an excuse for nations to stop trading with China, to make China the bad guy, right? But as we saw with the tariffs, this is gonna blow up in their face. But you know, the money must be really good to continue with it. The weapon stocks, the production, right? The United States at this point is a nation that is its main industry is war. Yeah. You know, what else do they manufacture in the US that isn't bombs and that isn't weapons?
when people talk about Joe Biden, they always say Joe Biden is out of his mind, which is true. I do think it's true.
Yeah.
They often would say, though, that somebody else is running foreign policy, and I always disagree with it. Because in my mind, there are two things that are taking place at once. There's globalists who care more about this kind of economic control of the globe, and there are neocons who may not care all that much about the economic part, but they do care about control, like this kind of power projection and control. Both are lunatics. And you can get a person who would say, we need China embroiled into a proxy war. And so let's use Taiwan in order to go after China, or yes, use Ukraine to go after Russia, without necessarily caring all that much about the consequences of doing so, because it backfired. Like, yeah, Europe stopped trading with Russia, but look at what Russia did. They started making business relationships all over the world, like literally business relationships. And even started threatening the dollar by saying, hey, you took us off the SWIFT system. Okay, we need to come up with our own currency. In which case, Trump freaks out. It's like, hey, we need to make deals with the Russians because we need to stop them from doing that. Okay, well, the neocons don't care about that per se. They want to still go after Russia any way they can, or go after China any way they can. I agree with you. I guess my thing is, does a war between India and Pakistan do that? It does create conflict in the region, and it is a situation where China works with Pakistan, but it also works with India. And it's not like the US has a close relationship with India in this proxy sense in a way that it does with Ukraine. I guess I have a hard time seeing, I get how a conflict in the region can create chaos. I don't entirely see how it embroils China into anything.
Well, I mean, it could simply be, like making India pick a side, because India has been kind of the Trojan horse in BRICS as well, right?
Right.
In particular, Modi.
Yes, especially with the currency. Yes.
Yeah, like to mess with the Road and Belt initiative as well, right? With these projects that they've already been, what they did in the Panama Canal, right? Like they just did that. That was about the Belt and Road initiative was happening in Panama, and it's just about messing with the Chinese. It could be also about Iran. Iran and Pakistan and have they I think they share a border, actually. Maybe I'm wrong here, but they have several.
They even have border skirmishes, though. I mean, this goes to the terrorism thing. There's been
but they've been normalized,
in Pakistan.
Like Pakistan with Iran. Although actually, no, over the past, I remember a couple of years ago that Iran has been like pressuring Pakistan to pay their side of an oil pipeline.
Yes,
the Iran-Pakistan oil pipeline that Iran already finished building in 2015, and Pakistan has yet, to set a stone because the United States is not letting them. But no, actually, the other one is, I would say, India-China, right? Because India and China have de-escalated significantly over recent years.
Yeah,
they demobilized their troops from their shared border a few months ago, actually. It was very recent. So it really seems like I just like throwing a wrench into the proceedings, right? In a way that they, I guess, seek to control, right, with this conflict.
Or both of these countries have agency, and both of these countries have a storied history.
Yeah,
that they've been in conflict for years, and any spark pops it off. Like, look, I get it, right? Like, we're so accustomed to looking at the world in this kind of global lens, and many of these countries are used as useful idiots for larger conflicts. These are two massive countries, though. And I would agree with you that the Pakistani military has a close relationship with the United States. Is it possible that one of these terrorist groups did this to spark something? Maybe. Is it also possible that there's a terrorist group roaming through this region that killed these people, and that India is responding because 26 or 25 of their people were killed? Like, I don't know. I'm stuck in this position where I just don't know.
I remember reading a few weeks ago, I think this is something we put out the cradle about exactly this. And our writer, he mentioned that, well, first of all, that this is not like the first terror attack in I don't know how many years. That has happened before in the Kashmir administered, Indian administered Kashmir.
Yeah.
And the reaction was never this, right? It was never like these were going to start bombing your country and just escalate out of control. It
I'm
was
sorry to
all
interrupt real quick. That's true because in the other circumstances, India was trying to get the world community to back them, and the world community didn't care. And this time around, India was like, "Okay, we're taking the gloves off. We have no fucks to give. We're not taking this shit anymore, and we're
yeah,
trying
but
to
then
send a
like
message."
the timing of it, what I already said, like also this group, the resistance front had been dormant for years, and all of a sudden they just wake up. None of these things are coincidental, right? Like maybe that's a jaded perspective, but I think once you start actually studying history and once you start to actually seeing look at the Nord Stream, for example, right? The pipeline. They want us to believe that it was like 6 guys in a yacht that did it.
Look, I accept that. And look, there's even CIA documents where they wanted to go to war with Castro and they were going to either kill Americans for real or simulate it in order to create a pretext to do it.
Exactly, like or like the Cuban Americans, these terrorists who bombed the hotel in Havana or bombed a bunch of hotels in Havana during the 60s, I think, or the 70s.
Yeah.
All of these things are, they have a purpose. And I feel like when you put, when something happens that pits 2 nuclear powered nations against each other at a time in which you already have these wars igniting everywhere, I'll take it with a grain of salt, right? Like, I don't believe that this group just like came out of nowhere and was like, no, today we're gonna go and prove our point and for a free Kashmir. And it just seems too convenient. It just really seems too convenient. And like I said, at this point, one of the only driving forces of the U.S. economy is war. And there's really not much more. There's not much. I'm sorry?
Pakistan was using a Chinese missile, and India was using, like you said, Israeli drones, and French jets. So what we've seen used was technology from other countries, not America. And I guess my thing is, sometimes in a dream, a hammer is just a hammer. There's not any overt significance to it. Look, again, I do get it, right? I guess I'm saying I don't know. I'm not taking a position one way or the other. And I guess it sounds like I'm pushing back. I guess my position is I really don't know. These countries, they have a history of conflict. So it's not like, like Ukraine is neutral, the government is overthrown by the US proxies, and the proxies used to go. It's not that. You have 2 countries that have a history of war with each other and conflict that has never eased up, and a match goes off. Now, the catch becomes, why did that match go off? Which is your point. Why did that just happen?
And why did that? The timing, right? And maybe, you're right. You're right about the equipment, right? It's been a French and Chinese, but it could be just the Indian government being like, we need to galvanize, right, this movement behind us. Even though it's already pretty galvanized, like there's never gonna be enough threats for a government that wants to stay in power, right? And this is, for example, something that's happening in my country, in Ecuador, which is like every day, every 2 days, there's like a new threat. Something is trying to overthrow the government. So that you galvanize, right? And is there actually something trying to overthrow the government? Is there actually something threatening? Oh, no, there really isn't, right? This is all like, ghosts. This is made up stories. But what it does, it gives you that excuse. Right? Yeah. And so I feel like there's many angles. And I don't think we're going to actually know what happened until, I hope, things de-escalate. I hope the Iranians manage to work diplomacy, because at this point, you don't really see Western diplomacy in Pakistan and India. They're not, where's the French foreign minister? Where's the US? Where's Rubio? Where's anybody else, right? Right now, you only have the Iranians coming in and being like, hey, guys, can we chill here? Because this is all of us that are going to be affected.
Yeah, I agree with you. I strongly suspect that Russia and China are going to get involved. Like, hey, calm the F down. like we get it. You guys, you're pissed off. Yeah. We get it. These people
bring Pakistan into BRICS. Just bring them into BRICS and be like, hey, let's learn to live along with each other.
Chill out. Yeah, that's what China did with Saudi Arabia, right? It was Saudi Arabia and Iran, and China came out of nowhere, and it's like, all right, we got a deal between these two. And Saudi Arabia was kind of like a junior partner of BRICS, even though, like you said, they're not in it entirely, but they're not out of it either. Esteban, man, I've enjoyed this conversation. I really have. Thank you for this. I always appreciate these conversations. We have a damn good crowd. We had up to 700 people here today.
Oh, amazing.
The channel is growing. So we have new people that seem to be joining with us, and they seem to be enjoying these conversations also. Thank you for this, man. I really do appreciate it. And just so people will know where you are, Esteban Carrillo, he is Ecuadorian journalist, currently writing for The Cradle. He was previously with the great organization Tell Us Sir English. Esteban, where else can people find you, by the way?
Well, they can find me on Twitter. This is my handle underneath me right now. And they can find us at thecradle.co, the Cradle Media on platforms, on social media platforms. And on YouTube as well, we have a podcast, a weekly podcast goes out on Mondays called The Cradle News Roundup. So make sure to check that out.
Badass, man. Thank you for this. You have a damn good day. I'll see you in a few.
Jamarl.
Have a good one. Be safe. All right. We have had a really good show today. This is interesting. It was Modi really had nothing to do with it, but it's a permanent fixture and smears against him. It happened back in 2005. IRC. Again, if you talk to me about Russian politics, on some level, we can have a decent conversation. If you talk to me about the geopolitical stage, we can have a damn good, decent conversation. I can give you and have conversations about something that's taking place in pretty much most of the places in the world. This is very granular in regards to politics between India and Pakistan. And I am at a loss. Look, I will freely admit when I don't know something or I'm in the dark on something. I have no idea. I am stuck in this weird spot of saying, this is what India says, this is what Pakistan says, which one do you believe the most? And I can step into it and saying, okay, well, what is most likely to be true based on the way human beings engage, and just this kind of logical progression of how do we engage? Understand, though, that is coming from a U.S. perspective of things. I strongly suspect that that perspective is suitable because we're talking about issues of war, especially when we're talking about the fog of war and the way countries engage in wars and things that they say. As Johnny Miller pointed out, war is pretty much the same any way you look at it. The materials might be different, the weapons might be different, the tactics may even be different, but it's still fundamentally at its core the same. And so when you're analyzing this stuff, there are going to be similarities. What we miss, though, are the politics that are driving it. Again, it is a high bar for me to say that they murdered their own people to provoke a conflict. And my thing is, okay, well, why do they need this conflict? Why is it to their interests to have this conflict? Does Kashmir matter that much where they would do something like this? And again, this gets into the politics, right? India would say, well, Pakistan is a basket case and they need to organize their energies in a war or organize their energies, especially if they're at risk of losing various territories in Pakistan. Okay, well, that's the argument from the Indian side. What's true? And the rub is, it's like if you're talking to a Ukrainian about the war, okay, you're going to get a radically different story and take, as opposed to if you're talking to somebody who's in Russia. The revolution of dignity. Okay, it was a coup. You overthrew, with the help of the US and the West and NATO countries, you overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine. If you want to call it a revolution, okay, God bless you. But I'm going to say you're full of shit. I hope you get my point. Regardless of how they talk about it, there's reality to it. And there may be subjectivity on some level to it. But there is a such thing as reality to it. My objective is to get to, okay, what's more likely to be real? Sitting on the moon, looking at events. I don't have a dog in this hunt, which is the reason why I bought on both Hazma and Shoban, where you can hear both sides of it. It's interesting, to put it mildly, right? Look, I'm going to end this because, well, yeah, that's their religion. So what? Scott Ritter said last time I saw him, if my passport, Trump is a moron. Oh, fuck my passport, Trump is a moron. Here's the thing, Scott. I'm not going to say anything about Scott. That blew up far more than I wanted to. I was slightly embarrassed by the way that that thing blew up. By my comments on Ritter. I did not like his take. It had nothing to do with Ritter as a person. I didn't like his take because it felt like let me say it this way. I only try to give you my take and my opinion based on my value set. That's all. There's nothing else pushing it. If I am on Sputnik radio and I feel pushed to take a side on something that I don't believe in, that will be the day I lose my job. And to be bluntly honest with you, I had cleared out my desk and had my key card ready to turn in on the issue of Gaza and Israel. In fact, I think that day I threw my key card on the desk, just waiting for him to take it because I thought he was going to fire me. There was a lot of pressure during Israel's slaughter of the Gazans. And I was being somewhat of a hard ass on that issue because I thought it was outrageous that all of these people were being murdered and it didn't seem like the world cared. And so show after show after show, I would hit that issue. And there was pressure behind the scenes for like, all right, we want to not be overtly belligerent in covering the issue. Now, in reality, the station effectively gave us room, far more room than Brianna Joy Gray had, far more room than any other network had. We had room to run with it. But there were limits because there was concerns that the radio station would be shut down if we went too far and too hard on that issue. The problem or the issue was that Israel at that point had taken all the brakes off. And so us reporting on it, even though I might have been a hard ass on it, was accurate reporting. I don't, or at the very least, I didn't get the sense that that's what Ritter was doing. And it seemed like he was organizing his point of view. Oh, it sounds weird. Around the Russian position. And if you were looking at Russian media when Donald Trump first got elected, it was very solicitous of Trump, very congratulatory, because the thought was that Donald Trump was going to effectively make a deal, end the war, or at the very least walk away from the war. That was the belief for several months. I mean, that was part of the reason why I didn't get an apartment in Richmond, why I was just kind of floating, saying, okay, we'll see what happens. No, my show is not going anywhere, especially now that it's been solidified. But if the opportunity opens up for the radio station and they want me back or they're open to taking me back, I can do both. No issue. Once the deal came out and it became clear that Trump was incompetent and the deal he came out was ludicrous, okay, well, the position started to change a bit. And at that point, I suppose that the Russians looked at it like, okay, this is absurd. Is this really the deal that you're offering? Which I guess Ritter took that as more license to be like, fuck this guy. He's an idiot. He's incompetent. He's not going to get the deal with the Russians. In which case, less solicitous to Trump, more aggressive at Trump. In which case you get somewhat of a reversion back to the Ritter that was there before. Now, I could be wrong on this. I could be talking on my ass. And if I am, I'm sorry. I'm just saying this is observation. I could be wrong about observation. But it seemed to orient around stuff more so than just kind of, okay, well, what is your actual take? What do you actually believe in, if that makes sense? When he seemingly took this position on Iran that I thought was outrageous, that was my reason for going after him on that. Every bit as much as I would have went after John Bolton, because what he was saying was effectively a John Bolton argument. We can do what we do because we have the power to do it. Iran needs to capitulate because we are the United States and they are Iran. And so, they need to suck it. And it's like, well, that's a pretty outrageous position. That was a position with the US and the Russians, right? Hey, we're the US, you're Nigeria with snow. And so if we need to take over Ukraine, then you just have to live with the fact that we need to take over Ukraine. Okay, well, no, it didn't work that way. You threw your power dice on the table and the dealer took your money. I'm saying something needs to be similar with Iran. And to not acknowledge that Iran is a sovereign country, that if they want to build nukes, they should be able to build nukes every bit as much as Israel built nukes. Or if they want to have nuclear power, then they can have nuclear power every bit as much as Germany or many of these other countries have nuclear power. Our own State Department said they're not building a nuclear weapon. Then how the hell are we justifying unilaterally threatening them with military action? They're not threatening us. They're not a threat to us. How are we doing this? And then to make it even worse, to do it on the behalf of a foreign country that has nukes and has been invading one country after the next and slaughtering the populations of those countries. Okay, to me, that's an outrageous position, especially if you can't acknowledge Iran is not a threat to us. They're not doing anything to us. They're not attacking us. And the country we're doing this on behalf of is a fascist apartheid state. That seemed to be an outrageous position to me. And so it had nothing to do with Ritter as an individual. It had everything to do with the position that he was at. I don't even think I attacked Ritter directly. I think I went directly at the position that he was taking, especially when you're going to say, oh, and by the way, the U.S. is going to use nukes and an attack on a country that is doing nothing to us with nuclear weapons, a first strike on a non-nuclear country. I found the argument to be outrageous. And by the way, it's the same argument that was used to go after Iraq with weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And now it's weapons of mass destruction in Iran. Okay, these things seem very similar. They lied about this, but you're somehow justifying this, almost in line with Trump. And is that justification because you still believe that Trump is going to somehow get a deal with the Russians? In which case you believe that Trump and Russia are, on somehow a similar page. I don't know. I took it very poorly. We killed 1 million people in Iraq. Unprovoked attack. And we are now talking about an unprovoked attack on Iran. I am deeply against anybody that would justify that. And don't give me the shit about, well, this is just the reality of events. Oh, fuck that. This is not just the reality of events. Either you can make this case that this is nonsense. This is outrageous. It's beyond immoral, beyond unethical. It's a catastrophe in the making that we are about to engage in purely at the behest of a maniac fascist apartheid state. If you can't say that first and make the point that Iran is a sovereign country and has every right to develop a nuclear program and that the fact that we're threatening it is outrageous, if you can't explain that first before going into, okay, well, the military reality is this, then you've lost me on that. That's an issue for me. Going from channel to channel and alternative media and selling this Trumpian point of view, I took issue with that. I just did. I mean, it is what it is. I just took issue with it. So it had nothing to do with Ritter as an individual. I don't think I said anything about Ritter as an individual. I was going after the position. If he is now back to, okay, there's not going to be a deal. I'm not going to get my passport. Fuck Trump on this. Okay, God bless. Fair enough. Just fair enough. Fair enough, fair enough, fair enough. Yeah, I guess that's my point. Like, it is an outrageous position. And by the way, the New York Times didn't even pan that out. When the New York Times was talking about the conversations that was taking place in the White House on Israel and Iran, the thought was that Israel and the US would attack Iran. Nobody said anything about nukes. Like, I think, like, that was the part that was mind-blowing to me. An attack on Iran is not mind-blowing to me. It's just a catastrophe. It's a disaster. Unpredictable, by the way, disaster. To take it up a notch and say, well, they're going to also use nukes. Okay, then that comes across to me as if you're trying to sell Donald Trump's argument and not just sell it, to radically take it up a notch in order to create a higher level of threat against Iran with the idea that they give more. Meaning, in the same way that Donald Trump is making these threats about attacks, it sounds like you're taking the Trumpian point of view and even escalating the Trumpian point of view of threats with the idea of trying to compel behavior, trying to bully and get something more in a deal that you wouldn't necessarily get if you just make an agreement or came to the bargaining table. Yeah, I took great issue with it. It just seems outrageous to me. And I don't quite know why other people don't see it as fucking outrageous. But whatever. It is what it is. I don't know. It just aggravated the fuck out of me. Yeah, it just aggravated me. I'm going to end this because I have got nailed down travel stuff. And it's a little bit more complicated than just going to a location. I have a lot of shit to explain to the show at some point that I can't explain it now based on where I am. But I'm going to end this. I'm going to say would say nice rant. I didn't mean it to be a rant. It's just, I don't dislike Ritter. I swear to God, I don't. He is a personality that is infectious when he is hitting something right. He's very bombastic, which is very entertaining to watch, which is the reason why I used to like him on the show. I did not stop him from coming on the show. He just decided not to. And again, that's just right. It's not a big deal. I don't take it one way or the other, if that makes sense. It's like if somebody asks me to come on the show and I say no, that's my right. It is what it is. I just thought the position was outrageous. And you must understand how I see it. We went into a foreign country and murdered 1 million people, or at the very least got them killed. That's outrageous. It should be outrageous. Like that's not a minor thing. Like if 1 or 2 Americans get killed, we'd lose our minds. Oh my God, I can't believe we did this. But you kill or get 1 million Iraqis killed, and it's oh well. It's almost like the numbers get ludicrous, and they're so ludicrous that we can't contextualize what it means to have that many people killed, to have that many children with radioactive poisoning going 10 years into the future. Like, we've destroyed that country, and even though they tell us to leave, we continue to occupy it. That is a big deal. That is, like, we take it frivolously. And then for the same thing to happen in country after country after country after country. And then we get to Iran. And after all of this killing and murder throughout the Middle East that we've been responsible for, and to talk frivolously about nuking, unprovoked nuclear attack on a country of 80 million people or something like that. Why is that okay? That's the part I didn't quite get. Like, I couldn't connect the two things. And I get people like him on the show because he gets a lot of views. But yeah, it's just outrageous. All right, I'm going to end this. Again, no shade on him at all, at least not intended. It's the position, if that makes sense. It's one thing if somebody says, Jamal sucks because I don't like his tie. Okay, well, that's, That's attacking me. It's another thing if they say, well, I disagree with Jamal's position on India, or I disagree with Jamal's position on Russia, or I think Putin did have other options as opposed to having a special military operation. Okay, now we're having a conversation about ideas. That's different than going after the person. I guess I'm trying to make the point of saying I never went after Ritter as an individual. I always went after his position. Yeah, I'm going to end this. This is gone. All right. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. I will see you guys first thing in the morning. Don't attack Jamal's time. Right. I couldn't think of another. I couldn't think of something else. All right. I'm going to end this. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Laith Maruth is going to be on the show. There's somebody else. Arno is going to be on the show. He's going to talk about what is taking place right now in Moscow. I'm probably going to try to get Sarah Bills. She did really well last time she was on the show. And I need somebody else because she comes on at 9:30. But I'll work it out. You all have a fantastic day. And I want to thank you all for joining me. We had a damn good spot today. We had nearly 700 people. And it wasn't like we had a goat on the show. Like what a goat on the show. I'll call him a horse typically. There's some people who are big draws, like Brian Berletic is a really big draw. Brittany used to be a big draw too. Mark Sabota can be a big draw depending on the topic. And those are people who they're so big that they drop. And honestly, Mark should be far bigger. Of everybody's analysis that you will ever see on TV, that you would ever see in social media, he is the voice of fucking God on the stuff. Like his understanding of it and analysis of it is bar none. Nobody comes close. Nobody touches it. Pick any random person. I take Mark for his analysis. I don't give a shit if Mark got one view. He'd be on the show giving his analysis because he tends to be right. And when he's wrong, he says, so, hey, I got this wrong. I didn't think this was going to happen this way. That's what you want, right? And so he is astonishingly good. I used to call him the voice of truth and reason. And he used to hate it. It's like, don't call me that. I hate that. It's like, dude, your ability to look at this stuff clearly has been more accurate than others. Meaning whatever his workable point of view is, the workable point of view tends to be more right. I guess my point is there's some people who are big draws. And when they do that, you get a lot of people watching at once. And when you get more people watching at once, it kind of just carries through. We didn't really have that today, per se. The show just did extremely well. The audience doesn't really know Johnny Miller, per se. And yet we still bubble up to like 600-700. I mean, granted, it was compelling conversation. I mean, he's talking about what it's like to be in a war zone and have, you're eating tea and crumpets and artillery starts banging down a few feet away from you, hitting buildings and hitting apartments and hitting shattering windows. That is hard to wrap your head around to live through that. Like, that's just astonishing. But look, I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. I want to thank all of you for joining me. You can support the work through PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats. All of those things help keep the show ticking along. I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. You be safe and have a fantastic day. Jamal Thomas Morning Show is above your pay rate with the FBI. All right, guys, have a good one.